I know there's some of you who are away for the summer that we haven't met yet, so I'd like to welcome everyone to council, especially if you are new. Would you just be able to close the door, please, Devin? Thank you. Give that a second. All right. So like I was saying, welcome everyone. I hope your beginning of semester has been productive and restful, though we all know it's probably not. So I'm just going to start the meeting by reading the Indigenous Solidarity Statement. So we'd like to acknowledge that Concordia University is on the traditional territory of the Ganyan-Gehaga, a place which has long served as a site of meeting and exchange amongst nations. The Concordia Student Union recognizes and respects the Ganyan-Gehaga as the traditional custodians of the lands and waters on which we meet today. So with that, the roll call sheet is going around. For those of you who haven't been to a council meeting, just make sure that you sign in because that's how we calculate attendance. So after 3 missed council meetings, you're automatically deemed resigned unless anything is excused. So with that, I do have some requests for excusal that I received. So tonight's a religious holiday, and I received requests from Dylan and Jeremy for that reason. And beyond that, that's it. So it's not explicitly stated in the standing regs. So we just need a motion to excuse Dylan and Jeremy, please. Yeah, Veronica?
Motion to excuse Dylan and Jeremy.
Okay, do we have a second? Tabia? All those in favor of excusing Dylan and Jeremy, please raise your placards. 15, all those opposed? And any abstentions? Perfect. So with that, yes, Rory?
This is more of a question. Should we maybe add that to the regulations that we have as per? Just that it came up that it's not explicitly stated, that maybe we should delegate that to someone to change so that it is explicitly stated in the future?
If you'd like to mandate policy committee to take a look at it, that is your prerogative.
I was commenting so maybe someone volunteered, but
Yes, Julia?
I moved to send this to policy committee.
Okay, do we have a second? Rory? I trust there's no discussion. All those in favor of sending the issue of religious holidays excusal to policy, please raise your placards. 13, all those opposed? 1, and any abstentions? 1. Perfect, so the motion carries. And with that, we'll move on to approval of the agenda. So just a little clarification, motions sent to me by Friday end up on the agenda, but after that the agenda is not modifiable. So if you want to add, amend, remove anything from the agenda, it's now that you do it. So anybody who sent me motions after the initial agenda was sent out, you need to have them put on the agenda right now or else they won't show up. So I'll go around the room this way. Rowan?
I would like to move the SUDS report to new business substantive, and as well pull the general coordinator's report and the finance coordinator's report.
Okay, for report, oh sorry, I was going to say for reports I put them at the end. Just a note.
As informational with the SUDS report, if possible.
You want all of those in information?
No, like as backup points for the SUDS report.
Okay.
I believe that's a thing.
I'll put 8F SUDS, G general coordinator, H finance coordinator.
I meant like 1 point. Is that a thing?
It could be.
If it's unnecessary, then.
No, it's not because they're not the same thing. So it'd have to be 3 points.
Okay, then scratch that. Sorry. But could I also add signing authorities to appointments?
Yep. I'll put that at the end. All right. Moving along. Yes.
I would like to add a motion.
Mm-hmm.
Do I need to say subject or like?
What do you want the point called?
Well, motion against the fascism.
Okay.
And what you believe is right.
Okay. I'll just call it motion against fascism. Great. Thank you. And deal with that there. All right. Moving along. Rory.
could I pull out the approval of the minutes? I sent you an email just that the other ones weren't available.
Yeah.
So I don't know if I should pull that out of consent agenda or just because they weren't available, so maybe we could table that point.
We sent out, sorry, I just wanted to make a note, the June 14th minutes, sorry they weren't sent out, we're just missing one motion. So those, you can have them removed from the agenda as they should be. And if you want to pull out July 27th because you feel that you want to discuss them, then that's fine.
You can pull them and deal with
There was one or two of them that were not in the...
Yeah, the
June 14th.
We can do that.
I'd also like to pull out of consent agenda from the standing committee reports, external committee, CAF. Yeah, that's fine.
All right.
Thank you.
Moving on, Julia.
Can I move community action fund the community action fund from appointments to informational?
Yep.
Thanks. Oh, that came out so wrong.
Okay. Moving along, Veronica.
Can we add Health and Space Committee to appointments, Appointments Committee to appointments,
Yes, we can.
Judicial Board interviews into presentation, guest speakers,
Okay.
and BOGSI into new business substantive,
Sorry, what was the last one?
Board of Governors seat.
Oh, well, that was in substantive, right?
Yes.
Okay. Moving along. Yes.
I'd like to add a quick discussion / informational point about the quarterly finances.
Okay. We'll put that in informational. Yes, Julia?
Can I make a motion called 10th strategic direction into substantive, please?
Called tense or 10, sorry?
10th strategic direction.
10, sorry.
Yeah.
I would like to add accessibility and independent student motions.
Okay. Those are from Reem, who's going to be a bit late, so I'll put them closer to the end if that's okay with everyone. Anything else? Omar?
Yeah, I would also like to remove June 14th minutes from the agenda given that they were late.
Yes, we can do that. Alright. Anything else? No, Omar.
No, that's all.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
Roy?
Okay, I thought you were going around. Could we add a point under new business informational, the software, correct me, software engineering?
Yeah.
Thanks.
Engineering. Done. Anyone else? Yes, Asma?
I'd like to add a CAF motion for
Okay.
amendment for standing regulations and the closed session motion.
Okay. So I have one point called CAF standing regulation amendment, and then one called closed session.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Moving along, Julia.
I don't want to add something, but I just have a question for you. Did you sort out the server?
No, that will never be sorted out, but I will
Okay.
send you the documents.
Thank you, because
You're
I'm
welcome.
missing like a ton.
I will on that.
Thanks, Caitlin. You're the best.
All right.
Wait a minute.
Anything else? Yes, Rory.
Point of information, could you just tell me what happened with CAF?
We'll.
It might nullify me pulling it out.
Do you want a direct response?
Sure, it's an amendment to the standing regulation, so that it's something that couldn't wait for the policy committee to go through, and it was something that was supposed to go through last year, and it's just in order for the checks to be issued in September. Signing off, so.
So you're putting that on the, are you putting a new point on the agenda under? I just want to make sure we're not duplicating two different spots on the agenda.
If we are, we'll realize it when we get there. But the documents were sent out, so that is all good. Is there anything else to be amended, subtracted, removed? Okay, so I will just formalize this and send out the amended agenda after it's approved. Just making sure one last time, nothing else to amend. Okay, that's it, because we're not breaking Robert's rules. All right, so all those in favor of the agenda as amended and all items under consent, please raise your placards. 15, 16, all those, 16, sorry. All those opposed? And any abstentions? 1. Thank you very much. So if you give me 5 minutes, I'll put this in the council group so everyone knows where we are. I was going to say we can take a food break, but it's not here yet. So bear with me for 5 minutes. Oh, yes. Oh, it is. Okay. Would everyone be amenable to food break currently?
Yes.
Okay. Recess it is. We'll come back in 10 minutes. to presentations and guest speakers. So the first point on the agenda is Judicial Board. Layla moved this, I believe.
Wait.
Layla or Veronica? Yes?
I told you that a consent agenda.
Yeah, they go at the end in substantive because we need to approve. This was Layla's point, yes? Veronica?
I'm moving to close session.
Okay, do we have a second? Omar? All those in favor of moving into close, please raise your placards. 11. All those opposed? 0. And any abstentions? 1. Okay, so at this point, I'll ask everyone who's not myself, the minute keeper, executives, council, judicial board, to please leave the room. And for the people who are interviewing for the JB, we'll call you in as we go. At this point, we are on number 6, which is appointments, and the first one we have is 1 seat on the Loyola Committee. Gabby, this one's yours.
Yes, so we still have 1 member left for the Loyola Committee. This year we're going to be doing a lot of different events that appeal to all different types of interests of our students. So in 9 days we have an animal welfare awareness event. We're going to have a couple of sports events, including Quidditch, soccer tournaments. We're going to have workshops. I'm going to work with external for that. At the end of the year, I want to have, well, I'm sure you read the report, but the point is that we're going to have a lot of really interesting events. So I would really love for any of you to join me to make the events as enjoyable as possible for all the students at Loyola.
Great, thank you. So would anyone like to nominate themselves or someone else to sit on the Loyola Committee? Okay, if there's no nominations, it'll come back at the next meeting. Okay, so if there's no one, okay, we'll move on to 6B, which is Appointments Committee. And Veronica, this one's yours.
Yeah. Appointments, is it?
Yeah.
Yeah, so Appointments Committee, we essentially appoint student at-larges to different university bodies where we have a seat, the CSU has a seat. We vet their CVs, their resumes. We meet over the summer we met quite a lot, but now it's going to be less often just because we've already did most of the appointments. It's a fun committee. I get good food. There is 1 seat open. So.
All right. Is there anyone who'd like to nominate themselves or someone else? Yes, Eamon.
I'd like to nominate myself.
Okay. Do we have a second? Julia? Is there anyone else who'd like to nominate themselves or someone else to the Appointments Committee? All right. So if there's nothing further, we'll move to motivation. So, Eamon, why would you like to sit on the Appointments Committee?
Well, for starters, I'm going to be stepping down from the clubs committee, so I'd like to still be contributing on a committee, on another committee. Besides that, I do have experience in making appointments in my capacity on Concordia's board of directors, so I feel like I'd be a relatively decent fit for the appointments committee.
All right. Thank you very much. Is there any more discussion to be had before we move to a vote? Okay. So all those in favor of appointing Eamon to the Appointments Committee?
Myself, right?
You can, but.
I'm not going to do that. I'm going to stay.
13, all those opposed, 14, sorry, all those opposed, and any abstentions? Amen. Perfect. Yes, Julia?
Not really. Do you want it noted?
That I abstain?
Yeah, just pointing Robert's rules, if ever you want your abstention noted in the minutes, you can request that it be noted. Or if you want your dissension or your yes vote noted, you may do that too. Moving on. So we're on 6C, which is Clubs and Space Committee, and Veronica, this one's yours again.
Yeah, so the Clubs and Space Committee, we approve new clubs, we review the club standing regulations, and we approve club budgets for the year. We are going to meet quite frequently in the next few weeks, just because we have a lot of budgets coming in. I also try to get good food for this committee. So please join me and the rest of the counselors.
Great, thank you very much. Is there anyone who would like to appoint, to nominate themselves or someone else to sit on the Clubs and Space Committee? Yes, Ali.
Also, I would be interested, but I'm really busy for the next month or so.
Is it possible to join a committee afterwards, like mid-year? Does it have to be now?
Do you have a direct response?
I mean, you could join it and then not come to our meetings and then show up once you're free. I think as long as we reach quorum, that is okay.
Okay, wait a second. Julia? Is there anyone else who'd like to nominate themselves or someone else to sit on the Clubs and Space Committee? Okay, so if not, we'll move to motivation. So why would you like to sit on the committee?
Because I'd like to be involved and help clubs like get funding and space. I know it's something that's not my concern with DCA, even though it's not directly related to here, so I'd like to see the behind of the scene and get involved with that.
Thank you very much. Is there any more discussion to be had before we move to a vote? Okay, so all those in favor of appointing Ali to the Clubs and Space Committee, please raise your placards. 14, all those opposed, and any abstentions? 1, perfect. So Ali, congratulations, you're on the Clubs and Space Committee. So with that, we can move on to 6D, which is signing authorities. And Rowan, this is your point.
I nominate both Rory and myself.
Okay, do we have a second? Julia, Rowan, your motivation.
Sure. So just a bit of context, when we first were, because Rory and I have been signing authorities since since the start of June, sorry. When we were first appointed, it was decided that we would only be signing authorities until September, thus why we need to be reappointed now. The reason that this was decided was just due to a bit of, there was some confusion about, and I actually was the one that brought it up, between sitting on Finance Committee as well as being a signing authority. So over the last couple of months, I haven't found that to be a problem at all. We've also, I think, done a very good job. We've been in communication, we've been working together, and so like a lot of times we'll discuss checks together, etc. like that. And furthermore, I think we have experience that really complements each other. I mean, I've been involved with the CSU for a relatively long time, and I know a lot of the standard regulations, etc. I don't know finance at all. Luckily, Rory does. So when we work together like that, we managed to kind of make a pretty good team, and I think it's worked out pretty well so far.
All right, thank you very much. Is there any more discussion to be had on appointing Rory and Rowan as signing officers? Okay, so if not, we can move to a vote. All those in favor, please raise your placards. 14, all those opposed, and any abstentions? 1. Thank you very much, and congratulations, Rowan and Rory. You are now the CSU's signing authorities. So with that, we are done appointments, and we can move on to 7 new business informational, starting with visioning on student space, and this was Veronica's.
So as council requested, the clubs department did a visioning on student space. We sent out a survey to all the faculty associations, to all of their member associations, to all the clubs, just to figure out how they're dealing with space, their offices around campus. Overall, the clubs that do have an office on campus are quite satisfied with it. However, the clubs that do not find it difficult to kind of pursue their mandates. So I will be I'll submit a referendum question in the by-elections, and we will be working on that at the policy committee to kind of ask students if they actually do need more space, and if we could potentially use funds from the SILT fund.
Thank you. Ali?
I just have a question. I was wondering what means you actually reached out to these clubs, because I know we've never heard of that. Well, I know it didn't reach us. I'm part of a club in DCA, so I was just wondering.
Direct response?
So we sent out emails. We sent out emails to all of the clubs. We also put in our newsletter, I believe. I also contacted all of the presidents of the faculty associations to kind of distribute that, because I don't have all the information of, say, CASA or the engineering faculty and even finance. I mostly have contacts with ASA. But yeah, so there's all in the report. I got some feedback from, I don't believe from the engineers, which is why I think a referendum question would be good. to get kind of that everyone's input into it. Yeah. So it was mostly by emails.
Thank you. I would say.
Yeah. Out of curiosity, would you please tell us what was the rationale by adding non-CSU groups to the survey?
Well, just because I think closing it off to CSU clubs wouldn't be fair, especially if we're kind of pursuing student space for everyone. So, do you have a follow-up?
Correct me if I'm wrong, but from my understanding of the previous council meetings when we talked about student space, and specifically talking about offices, I think my understanding that if we are to get more student spaces and more offices, these offices will go to CSU groups. So by adding groups such as groups under ASFA or CASA that already have offices, it makes the survey, I don't know what's the word for it, the technical word for it, but it makes the survey a bit wrong. Because if we had to consider having 100 clubs here and only 15 clubs under CSU, 100 clubs under CSU and only 15 clubs under CSU answered, and like the rest are all groups from CASA and ASFA that already have their offices from ASFA and from CASA. It makes it a little bit.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. Obviously, I think we would prioritize when we do get to that point spaces for our clubs and our CSU groups. Yeah, no, that totally kind of, I didn't think of that, so.
Thank you.
Yes, so it's just a direct question to you, Veronica, for the space, are you only talking about club space and those spaces? Do you, can individual apply as well? Because I mean, I know there's a huge kind of issue on space in my faculty right now, and then a lot of people was coming to talk to me, but I know I don't have it right outside of CSU. So I want to know, is there any way that those individuals could talk as well, or are you only focusing on the CSU club and those offices for now?
Direct response? I think if we do get to that stage eventually, we could potentially look at opening it to other groups too, to just regular students, so that they could access the space. So to kind of have like a modular space where, kind of like the library has your study rooms where everybody could book a room and then you could go in, get out when your time is done, and then another student could use it or another group could use it. I think that would be a good idea, but yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Bert?
I was just going to echo what Tiff had said earlier. One of the things that I'd noticed that we don't necessarily see, and I was on Clubs and Space Committee when we did this, one of the things that you can't see from this report is the subsections of those CASA respondents to the survey that would have said how many of them have an office or don't have an office. So when I look at the results and I see that about approximately a third of the respondents overall are from CASA, we don't know from here, at least just from the graph, whether all of the respondents to the next question, do you have an office or not, were all CASA saying yes, or all CASA saying, etc. So we don't know those subsections. However, that point has already sort of been brought up. I do think it's important that we look at some of the last questions in there, which is basically the groups that don't have offices, what would they want an office for? And then the groups that do have offices, what do they use their offices for? And I think that gives us the direction of what is needed by students, whether they already have or don't. It's equally relevant whether they have an office or not. And this report doesn't necessarily say that we'd be giving fresh offices to people that already have them. It is just an idea of, if you have one, maybe you have it and you hate something about it. Or maybe you don't and you'd want one because of X. My 2 cents.
Thank you. Julia?
Yeah, to Veronica's credit, I think CSU represents everyone, and like having idea of what the university community needs as a whole, whether they have an office already or not, is really important. I do think that maybe with once you've decided all the budgets for all the clubs, if there's some that you still have, you could send out like a census to all of the clubs, and that way you would have a more specific one also for them, and tell them that, you know, they are very strongly encouraged to respond to that, so that we could compare both. But I think having like this overall idea is important too, because like being part of a faculty association, I know that we've been fighting for office space for the past 2 years that I've been involved, and the university's like thing that they do all the time is, well, you're not the CSU, they have a person who's in charge of student space, have them speak to us. So while the CSU is the same as every other faculty association, we have the same problems, and if the CSU has a way of like making sure that all of these concerns are being voiced to the university, that also helps echo other groups on campus, and just helps the fight for student space to continue, and so that everyone actually has more room. Plus, like, if I don't know, there's not enough chairs in my conference room, well, the CSU could take that into account, and when they have office space for clubs, they could make sure that they have enough chairs in the conference room.
Thank you. Layla?
I guess it's similar to what Julia was saying, but just a lack of space is a lack of space, regardless of whether it's for a CSU club or for any other student on campus that we represent. So with that being said, the purpose of this was to gain an initial understanding. A referendum will do that on a broader level, and something like a census could be more directed towards the club's needs specifically. But ultimately, if there's a greater need from outside groups that don't fall under the CSU clubs, then that could also depend on, if we revisit the concept of acquiring a space, how that space is utilized and who that space is available to book beyond just CSU registered clubs.
So at this point, there's no one on the speakers list. So if there's nothing else for Veronica and visioning on student space, we can move on to Community Action Fund. And Julia, this one's yours.
Yeah, so there was like a little problem with that. So basically there's a place that's up for appointment. I just want to clarify that before we actually appointed anyone, and we could always add that to the next meeting or do it later if we want to break the rules, if Caitlin will allow us. But basically what happened when I was on CAF at the first meeting, the only person who was appointed was Madeline Summers and me and Alaïs. And so we had said that we wanted more counselors to be appointed so that there would be additional representation of the CSU there on that body, and also having members at large involved and people from external groups on campus. It looks like the external groups have been covered, but there's just me as a counselor, and also I wasn't even invited to the last meeting. So I think that should be rectified. Maybe the information, like of the email of who the chairperson is and stuff, should be sent out to all counselors so that they could ask them, because the process is a little bit different for CAF. And I think that we should appoint the person that will replace Alaïs. And I think maybe we should move to have an additional CSU counselor spot so that 3 CSU people would be there. I don't know if Ahmed's appointed as an executive or just as a member of the CSU, but I think that should also be clarified. Yeah, I think I just need clarification right now, because I know I'm on it, Alaïs was on it, but he's not on it anymore.
Alaïs is a student at large, so his position goes through appointments committee. That was my mistake to put it on the agenda.
Okay.
That's why it was removed from the agenda.
Okay, that's what I thought, but do we as a council maybe want to add a seat so that we could have another counselor available there? Because I think the fact that there's a lot of money on CAF is something that we should be considering. We should maybe have another person there who could be part of the discussions that could arise.
I have a speakers list of Rowan and then Eamon.
Yeah, I'm going to vote against adding another counselor. I know that one of the main reasons that Alaïs created this committee was to essentially decentralize funding. So create a way that it wasn't, because the CSU is one of the main funding bodies on campus. A lot of the funding is centralized in the CSU. So the main purpose of this committee was to create something where there was a majority community member seats. 4 of the 7 seats are to community groups like QPERG, Center of Gender Advocacy. I don't remember the other 2, I'm afraid. But the entire point was to have CSU funding resources that are under the control of the community more than directly into the centralized control of the CSU. And I think adding more councillor seats goes directly against the original point of creating this committee.
But can somebody clarify for me, like, whether, like, maybe Ahmed, you would know, are you on there as a CSU executive or as just a, like, is it ex officio? Like, do you have
do you have a direct response?
Yeah.
So I'm there as a CSU executive. The way that I read the handbook that I was writing and people vote for it is not to have anyone from CSU as a chair or minute keeper. It's for people from the community, so I was there as a member.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'm also on the CAF, but I'm sitting on it as representative of QPERG. And just echoing what Rowan said, the purpose of CAF is primarily to fund different community organizations and different initiatives. Those things being the groups that sit as the community seats on CAF have a lot more experience in dealing with them directly than the CSU does, than council does, at least. That's not saying it to, diss council or anything. It's just that they're not as, we as council aren't involved on the ground as different community groups within Concordia. Also, just as a point of clarification, Ahmed does not have any lesser seat on the CAF than anybody else in any capacity besides the fact that he cannot be minute keeper or chair. He still has voting privileges. He's still in every capacity except for the ability to take minutes or chair. He is in every other part. He is mine and Julia's, and everybody else is equal.
Thank you, Julia.
Would it be possible to maybe send me the chair's email so that I could make sure that I'm invited to other meetings? Because it really sucks that I would be counted as absent when I didn't know it was happening. Do you know what I mean?
Just to declare, the chair contacted me regarding that today, so I'll sort it out, don't worry.
Thank you.
Ahmed?
No, I said similar to what you said. I can contact the chair is Mariam, Mariam Miller, so I can share it with you.
Thank you.
All right. Is there any more discussion we have on CAF? Perfect. So with that, we can move on to quarterly finance and Sule. The floor is yours.
Yeah. So basically, it's I believe in the either regulations or bylaws that we have to present our quarterlies. In order to one of the things I wanted to do this year is just have more transparent numbers, right? So I'm going to be doing this on a monthly basis. Just showing kind of like an update of where we're at in terms of the spending, in terms of the revenues and all that. So before I begin, are there any questions as to the document that's for the quarterly finances? Okay, so when you open the document, you'll notice that there are three columns. One of them is year-to-date P0 to P3 actuals. That's the amount that we've spent so far. The second one is year-to-date P0 to P3 budget. And the last one is annual budget. So the annual budget is what we approved, the numbers that we approved at the June council. Year-to-date P0 to P3 budget is an estimate of where we should be at, but it's not necessarily representative for all lines. So it's all, the bottom line is all pretty much spot on with an allowable variance. There are a couple things that I would like to bring up just for people's attention. Let me just get to it. The IT expenses. So there's a whole section for IT and MIS. Unfortunately, some of these expenses are some of the things that are moving. So, for example, migration, some of the website stuff is ending up costing us a bit more than we expected. So that's why you'll see that there are some expenses, for example, in IT external labor, that's a bit higher than what we projected. For IT migration, I believe we're going to be going over budget by a little bit. So that's for that. The other thing that I wanted to bring up is the Concordia Farmers Market payment. So there was a contract that was made last year that we didn't know about when we had made the budget for June, right? Essentially, it's a payment to the Concordia Farmers Market on behalf of CFC, and I believe Devin can go into more detail as to what it is for the farmers market payment.
Yes, so how the farmers market payment works. Last year, the sustainability coordinator was working on a contract with the CFC and the farmers market. So the CSU will have a 5-year contract in which it gives $8,000 every year to the CFC to administer towards the Concordia's farmers market.
Yeah. So essentially, we met with the Finance Committee to approve this $8,000 that was not budgeted for us, just like to keep everything on the up and up. And we added a line in the budget called Concordia's Farmers Market Payment so that it can be accounted for future years. And finally, actually, no, I think that's about it. And yeah, cool. Actually, wait, there is one more thing. Expenses for prior years not accrued. We budgeted $1,000 for expenses that were made in prior years that had never been cashed in. And I believe we might be going over the 1,000 because things keep popping up here and there that we weren't aware of.
All right, thank you. Are there any questions about the quarterly finance report? All right, so if everything's good, we can move on to 7D, which is software engineering. And Rory, the floor is yours.
Well, I wanted to pass the floor to Eleanor.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't know how to add that, so.
Oh, it's okay.
I just want to bring to attention, because I know a few of you might have heard about this story, because I know it popped up on Facebook a lot and people have been talking about it and spreading weird rumors. So I want to clarify and kind of explain what happened within the engineering faculty. You might have heard, so basically what's going on is you have to pursue an engineering degree and to graduate as an engineer, you have to be taught all your core classes by a PhD engineer. And it's something that's being checked by the OIQ and some accreditation board. So that's normally how all programs go, and normally the system at Concordia, the SIS thing in which you register, doesn't let engineering students register in non-engineering taught classes. But apparently there was a fuck up somewhere in the middle, and they let software engineering students register for comp classes that was actually not taught by an actual engineering professor. That was a few years ago. And right now there's the accreditation board coming up this November, and they're going through records and noticing that they can't graduate as engineers because they haven't done the code with the right professors. So they basically are voiding these courses of students' records. And these are like 200 level courses, and for engineers, if you don't complete your 200s, you can register for 400s. And to graduate as an engineer, you have to complete like this big 8-month project at the end called the capstone, available once a year. And some students have been dropped out their capstone projects in their final year by the system because their courses have been like voided. So that was a big concern. It's not sorted yet. I don't know exactly where it is at. I know like things are moving, students are complaining a lot, and I believe the software engineering curricular manager, advisor, I forgot his title, I could check that. Anyways, try to reassure the students and said that faculty was going to deal with it. But I wanted to bring it up because it's still a problem that might cause some troubles, especially in case of international students, because we're supposed to pay fees. If there's 1 year postponing to graduation, that is stupid fees for like international students, for example, even for normal students. But one like graduates and engineers having this postponed is like very inconvenient. So yeah, I just wanted to bring this to the point and advise the council.
All right, thank you very much. Ali?
I think in regards to this, we're going to be bringing at least one student and a professor from the department to academic caucus. I think it's a good idea to have a discussion with them and maybe even take them to Senate with us to speak, because this is very important and this is part of our role as senators even. So we're going to look into that.
Thank you. Rory?
I mean, Concordia University, the administration, we can only assume is already scrambling for this, right? They know that the accreditation body is coming to inspect very soon. So I don't think it's necessarily on us to like prod them to try and act faster. I think they're already probably trying to act pretty fast. But I do think it's important for us as the representative union to at least state our support for this and come out in a position and say, look, this has disadvantaged these students. This is a mistake that you've made. Own up to it, take responsibility, and fix it for these students, because we represent them just like everyone else. So it's not that we should try and get Concordia to do something. I assume they already are, but it's just that we need to reinforce to them that representing the whole student body, this is something important for us.
Thank you. Ali? Sorry, Ali and then Ali.
Me first?
Yes.
No, I just wanted to like come back a little bit on this point and just state that I'm just scared that faculty might just protect their accreditation more than students, and it's kind of CSU's job to be on the student side in this whole thing.
In addition to that, also, especially with international students, they're going to have to pay international fees again. It's a lot of money. And then in addition to that, you have visa fees that will probably be extended. And that is also a lot of money. And it's unfair for these students to have to go through something like that. It's quite ridiculous, actually. And it's the university's fault. So they have to do something about this. And we need to make sure that they do. Because if they don't, then this is just not okay.
So I have Awa, Tiff, and then Peter, and then Kevin.
I'd like to echo all that has been said, and I agree with Rory. A public position needs to be taken by CSU in this regards, and especially added to it the financial problem that international students are going to have. Not only international students, but more international students. Also, normal students. So yeah.
Great, thank you. Peter?
Yes. I just wanted to address to all the executive team, because it really happened to me, because like I know that I'm on the CSU council and I'm not supposed to have any like things outside of CSU, but right now what's happening that I don't know why, for some reason my department people has always talked to me and then saying like, can you maybe bring up to this issue, because I know we do have a lot of issues in our departments in France now. So I was just wanting to say that is there any way possible that we can address to the public, because I mean it's really happening to me that they just come to talk to me all the time saying like, can you help us doing something else, but like I don't have the right to do that technically. So.
Thank you. Kemi? Okay. Ali?
I just wanted to say also that may not have stressed that it seems like still like the software faculty is also on the move, so we shouldn't like maybe not blame them or be on the aggressive side, because like I know they're also trying and they know they messed up, and we should just be supportive. I know people are getting super angry here and there, and I don't think it's an appropriate solution. I just wanted to make it clear.
Thank you. Gordon?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't want to maybe frame it this way earlier because it sounds quite drastic, but when you bring up the international students having to pay, say, 10, 20 grand in tuition, what it brings to mind for me is that, and some of us may not have this perspective from different types of programs, but I know a lot of engineers, often they have their internships or their jobs lined up upon graduation. They have that schedule in place. It's a very structured, super structured program, and they know they need to take that 400 level class. They already have that job offer, conditional on their graduation. So if they suddenly get this, oh wait, it's going to be a year for you to graduate, well, okay, now that's 1 year that they're not working that they would have been, that we could safely assume they probably would have been. So for an engineer, that's also 1 year of delayed salary. You're now, as a student, we could assume zero income, studying, paying more, paying again, and you're losing out on that full year of employment. So like, this is a very serious deal for the university. I would just assume that, you know, administration is not stupid. They've probably realized this. They probably realized what I've just said. I hope they take some kind of action on it, but I just think we need to state it that as students we support that.
Thank you.
I was wondering like what kind of solution we can bring to the table about this, because it's very like it is not an easy how to say, like issue to negotiate with on top. So I don't know, any suggestion about this?
Did you have a direct response, or was kind of a question?
He was looking for suggestions. I have an idea.
Okay, we'll wait for it to come around. Asma?
Yeah, just to respond to some of the comments, I wouldn't bank on chance for this issue to resolve itself. I think the suggestion made by Ali and Ali Shara is a very, very good one. This is a matter for academic caucus. This is certainly something we need to mobilize around, especially if it's touching on academic interest. There's been some concerns raised online. There's been some concerns raised by individuals. It's been brought to my attention today too, and I definitely think it's not something to just wait around with, especially with the considerations that we have, financial and otherwise for individuals and how it's going to impact them. I think it's a pretty straightforward solution.
Okay, so I have a speakers list of Awatif, Ali, Rory, and then Ali. Floor is yours.
Oh my God, yeah.
Oh, sorry, you were first. Sorry, my mistake. I keep missing the first person. Julia?
Oh yes, so basically I wanted to recommend that we should vote on it to bring it to Senate and talk about it there. Maybe we could appoint the person who's responsible for academic caucus now to bring that up at the next academic caucus so that senators and the people who sit on board of governors can strategize together to find a way to bring this up at the next meeting. I think being part of the highest academic bodies, the CSU has a nice role to play where we could talk this through with people who have the power to make these decisions, and maybe the chair of academic caucus could send an email out to the ECA to see how they're dealing with it so that we could work together to make sure that this stuff doesn't happen. I think it's very relevant because of international students, and that's something that the CSU is really into protecting, and also just the right to education means the right to graduate on time. So yeah, I guess I'm proposing to send this off to academic caucus to deal with.
Okay, oh, sorry, my mistake. Ali?
I think we are forced as senators to actually discuss this in academic caucus. So it's not going to be a matter of vote really. It's just we need to actually do something about this.
Just can I have a response?
It wasn't a question, but I'll put you back on the speakers list. Rory?
Just to respond to Ahmed, I don't necessarily think what I'm trying to propose with this point is not that that we tell the university how to solve it. It's not that we need to brainstorm the solutions. It's that we just tell them this is something important, and if they can't solve it, then maybe we come forward with some of our suggestions if they haven't thought of them. But what comes to mind is that if we pretended like we were the collective bargaining unit for students, right? We are a union, we represent those students, and the university has done something, they've made a mistake that has caused injury to financial, academic, career, caused injury, their mistake. If they don't rectify it, then it's on us to, I'm just hoping that the school pays for that tuition, covers it, they should have insurance for these, I'm only assuming, and I'm playing with ideas out loud, but they should have insurance for when they make mistakes like that. Right? I would hope that these students aren't totally out of luck, that the university's going to be sorry, take the class again.
Thank you. Ali?
There's something that I've been told, but I'm not sure if it's relevant, but someone told me that they went to see faculty and that they may still be able to get back in their classes. But I don't know where it goes. But anyways, my other point that I wanted to bring up is just, can we do something about people sharing rumors about how Concordia fucked up so bad that OIQ is coming to inspect us because we're known in the nation or something? I don't know, it seems pretty extreme, I've seen that.
Have you seen examples?
The student union can't stop people from saying things, unfortunately.
Okay. I guess it's faculty's job to clarify the situation, but maybe ask them to clarify the situation.
If you would like to move that. The council can request something of the university. So if you'd like to make a motion to formally make a request, that's fine. The university is not obliged to follow it, obviously, but it brings some teeth when council does it. Rhoda? Oh, sorry.
I was just going to say, yeah, otherwise I can just try to build a thing on my side. And that it might be more effective than trying to play it powerful. But yeah.
Says council wishes. Roy?
I motion that the issues surrounding software engineering students be delegated to academic caucus with the goal of supporting the students and finding the best solution for them.
We have a second. Julia, your motivation, Rowan?
I think that this is more or less what most people have been saying along the entire lines. I think that it is, as everyone else has already said, it's extremely important that we support these students in light of the program, in light of the international students, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, everything's already been covered, but yeah.
All right, Julia?
Yeah, and I think it's really important that we send it to academic caucus because, yeah, well, some of us are counselors who sit on it, not all the senators or like people on academic caucus will be made aware of this, so like it should be delegated to the chair of the committee to bring up there. And also like this is relevant to send to academic caucus because there is like an article, I think, in the bylaws or the standing regs that says that council could send out information to be discussed, so that this way we're sure, since it was brought up by somebody in the engineering faculty, that it is discussed, because it's really important for us to deal with this in a way that we can really strategize about before the next meeting. So yeah, I really recommend that we do this. It's super, super important.
All right. So we're on the motion now. The first speakers list is gone. Michaela? Okay, there was no one on the speakers list. Just making sure that nobody wanted to say anything else. Okay, so we can move to a vote. All those in favor of Rowan's motion, please raise your placards. 15, all those opposed. And any abstentions?
Can I have my yes voted, please?
Yes. Ahmed. Abstention. Okay. Oh, sorry. No, wait, you don't vote. All right. So the motion carries. We're back on the main speakers list, which is you. Who's next?
I just want to correct one thing that was mentioned. If you study engineering and you're co-op, there's a sequence that you have to follow, but there's internships, and these internships are paid, and they receive like 15 to 20, depends, per hour, whereas in some programs it's for free, but I just like want to correct this. And if you are in CIADI or you get any internship, you get paid for this as well. So in engineering, for my information, there is nothing for free. There is no unpaid internships. So I want to correct this as well.
All right, thank you. So I have a speakers list of Julia, Peter, Sally, and then Ali. Julia? This was the original one.
Oh no, I rescind now. Thank you.
Peter?
Yeah, I'm just wanted to say one thing though, for all the council to know, like back to the rumor that you guys are saying just now, like it just that I think the problem right now that students only see us as the council who are really above them, so everything that they only come to talk to us because like they just either don't know where to go, or they just like that. But then we also know that we don't have the right to be above them. But like in the end, students only will think that as if we are the one to be really bad acting in front of them, but like we don't have the right to deal with that. So like just want like all council know, because like this is a big thing right now.
I agree.
Thank you. Sally?
I rescind.
Okay. Ali?
I just think we should move on because we've already voted on what should be done.
Yeah, it's procedural to go through the rest of the speakers list, but we are done. So at this point, if there's nothing else to discuss, we can move on to 8A, which is daycare. And Omar, the floor is yours.
Yeah, so I'll read the motion first, and then I'll take questions, and we'll have a discussion about it. So the CSU has been working in close collaboration with the Concordia University Student Parent Center in order to improve the current level of support the university is providing to our student parents. Whereas in 2011, a research document sponsored by CUSP and the Dean of Students Office was developed titled Student Parents and Their Children, How We Can Help Them, Analysis of the Student Parents' Experience at Concordia University, which outlined childcare as a primary stressor for student parents. Whereas other universities like UDM, McGill, and Laval already provide daycare services. Whereas a study was conducted by the CSU in order to understand the broad implications of going ahead with the CSU-run daycare in 2014. Whereas in 2014, 87% of the CSU membership voted yes for an on-campus daycare service during referendum. Whereas in 2016, Concordia University agreed to provide an ideal and sufficient space for student-parent daycare. Whereas the CSU already has spent approximately $120,000 on demolition and preparation for final renovation of the daycare building. Whereas Concordia University has agreed to provide financial assistance for the final renovation costs, approximately $270,000 plus taxes and 15% contingency for renovations and 50% of $115,000 for demolition costs. Whereas the CSU went to tender, which was overseen by Madame Maggie Apollon, the CSU appointed architect and 3 quotes were submitted, which are attached. Whereas Madame Maggie Apollon has suggested to award the contract to Construction J. Michael for being the lowest bidder at the price of $941,000 plus applicable taxes and fees and 15% contingency. Be it resolved that the CSU allocate $941,000 plus applicable taxes and fees and 15% contingency from the Silk Fund for the renovations, contingent on the approval from the Fund Committee. Be it further resolved, the CSU allocate $35,000 plus applicable taxes and fees and 15% contingency for the purchase of equipment from the Silk Fund, contingent on the approval of the Fund Committee.
Thank you. Do we have a second? Ali, and your motivation?
So we've, for quite some time, have been working on the daycare. The challenge first was to get space, and we were able to work with the previous executives were able to work with the university to secure space. It took a long time to make sure that the building was ready for renovations, given that there was a lot of work to be done to remove the asbestos and a lot of structural work on the building itself. And those are the costs mainly being covered by the university to make sure that the building and the structure is sound. And so at this point, the CSU, the last cost of them is the $941,000 to make sure that it's fully constructed and ready to be in service.
Okay, Rory?
Yeah, I have a quick question going through these documents. I did read through all of these proposals and looked at all these sort of attachments from the the business registration unit in Quebec, etc. The one thing I didn't see for the company that we're proposing to go with was their insurance document. All the other companies in this package had their proof of insurance, and this company didn't. I'm going to safely assume that they do have insurance. Do we have a document? My question is, do we have a document for it to prove? And if we don't, or if we do, I just want to ensure that if we're choosing this company, they have that insurance for if we go past the 20 weeks, or if they go past the 20 weeks, like we don't have to pay them as much.
Direct response?
Right, so I'm not aware of their insurance document. This is everything that I've received from the architect that's looking after the daycare. What I would suggest, however, is to add in the motion, or to amend the motion to say that they would have to provide us with their insurance document for the motion to be fully valid.
Okay, Roy?
I amend to add, be it further resolved that this depend upon proof of insurance.
Satisfactory insurance provided to, if they insure $2, doesn't make a difference.
Yeah, satisfactory insurance provided to the CSU. I feel like that's wrong.
Be it further resolved that this depend upon satisfactory or proof of satisfactory insurance provided to the CSU.
Yes.
Okay, so we're all happy with the wording. Do we have a second? I'll take it in a second. Rowan, your motivation?
Yeah, the conversation that took place prior explained it.
Okay, Rory?
Can we please amend that for construction liability insurance? Because as a construction company, they can have liability for if something breaks and they hurt someone, etc. But that's totally different from if they can't produce the building that we bought on time, etc.
Okay, I'll count that as motivation. Julia, second. Can this be considered friendly? Yeah. Perfect. Moving on. Okay, so can Rowan's amendment, sorry I didn't get to there, can Rowan's amendment be considered friendly? Perfect. So we're back on the speakers list, which is no one. So if there's no one else who wants to speak, then we can move to a vote. All those in favor of Rory's motion with the amendment, please raise your placards. 13, all those opposed, and any abstentions? 1, 2. Perfect. So the motion carries. Is there any more discussion we had on daycare? All right, so if not, we can move on to 8B, which is motion against fascism. So I'll just ask you to read the motion and then we'll do the motivation.
Yeah, so be it resolved that the CSU adopt the following position, that the CSU opposes the rise of fascism and its current manifestation as the alt-right both locally and internationally, and that the CSU support local groups which carry a similar mandate.
All right, do we have a second? Eamon? And your motivation, Kemi?
So, in the light of what's happening currently in both in the United States and here, so the rise of the alt-right, as we've seen in Charlottesville, and as we've seen many groups here in Quebec or in Canada happening, to name a few, La Meute, Soldier Avoidance, Storm Alliances, that are groups that are far right, basically. They are like praising discrimination and racism and all those horrible things. I believe that it's kind of the duty of the CSU to make a position on this matter.
Yeah. All right. Yes, Rory?
Just a point of order. It was Charlotte on the agenda, but it's Kemi.
Yeah, sorry, that's not a point of order. That's my own notes that I just sent to you guys because I didn't want to make 2 agendas since there was a lot to add. So it's not actually an order thing. My apologies. I mistook you two or mixed up your names. All right, is there any more discussion to be had on the motion? Oh, sorry, Amy.
I'd also like to motivate in favor of it and motivate from a more practical point of view. In that if we recognize that we're a union, we exist to protect our students. We recognize that there are some students among our student body that are more in need of protection than others, given that they are more marginalized than others. And we recognize that within the past couple weeks, there has been a group posting around campus at Concordia that is the same group or a chapter of the same group that is responsible for attempts to sink refugee boats in the Mediterranean. I consider this to be a fundamentally necessary measure to be taken.
Okay, thank you. How about you?
It's more of a point of information. You've mentioned there is a group around campus that's been posting. Would you mind bringing their name?
So the group's called Generation Identity.
Generation Identity.
Yeah, their posters have it's a yellow lambda, in which, there's been some people looking into it and they've been doing a sort of, they did a planned recruitment thing, putting up posters at a bunch of universities Canada-wide.
Great, thank you. How about you?
Just to clarify, so they're not a based group here, they're an external group posting inside?
They're an external group posting around universities in Canada, attempting to set up shop at different universities.
Thank you. Rowan and then Julia.
Yeah, so to further expand on what Eamon has said, like they posted on the same day at campuses all across Montreal, so whether or not it's like Concordia students or just external people who came to the university and posted is unknown, and apparently also Toronto. And to clarify like the group's ideology, when they say generation identity, one of their main points is protecting white identity, quote unquote.
Thank you. Julia and then Rory.
This might be a very logistical question, but did these posters have a stamp of approval from any of the faculty associations or CSU? Okay, so like my question is, if someone could answer it, why is it that the posters were up for that long? Like that people were able to notice? Like, doesn't security remove every poster that's not stamped?
I have a lot of direct responsibility to ask.
There's been a violation of the posting policy, both for the university and CSU, so members have taken out on themselves to poster our stuff. It is difficult to manage at a time when you have orientation and different events, plenty of stuff being put on. But it has been reported to CSU and members have noted it and brought it to their attention. It isn't always on CSU property, like around CSU, it's also externally on buildings and entrances that may not be monitored in the same way based on the procedures that are already in for security to remove stuff. So those are some of the possibilities logistically that have come up.
Thank you. Rory?
In the same vein, I was just assuming that no student group would support something like that, but if these posters are finding their way onto campus and they do endanger and threaten some of our students, then why can't we take more of a proactive approach to protecting them? Is there something we can do defensively, be it hire volunteers, get a group of people who will walk around once a day and check around campus and rip these things down? I mean, even if it's something as simple, I know it sounds very overly simple to say, well, let's hire someone to walk around and tear down posters. But if we have a group like this who's infiltrating our school, putting up posters that is threatening to some of our students, then it is our job to defend them. And if that means walking around and ripping off posters, then let's organize it so that's done.
Okay. Ahmed?
Just like it's similar to what Esma said. We get to know first day of school. We didn't even write a post on Facebook, or we didn't release a statement because at this time we didn't want to give them a credit or even talk about them and achieve their goal by if we speak about them. So we just like said, we're gonna take out the posters and we wouldn't even give them a chance to be promoted in campus.
Okay, thank you. I would say Rowan, Ali, and then Rowan?
First of all, I agree with what Ahmed said about not wanting to bring awareness to this group. I think it's a good point that this motion was generalized and didn't specifically call on them, because I don't think at this point it's necessary. They're fringe. They threw up a couple of posters one morning. There's no reason to believe they're actually part of the university community. Responding to Rory's point about organizing a group to walk around, as much as I think it's a very good initiative and it's a very good idea, last time these posters were torn up, they didn't last till afternoon. Students just recognized them and spread the word online within friend circles, and even people who had never heard of the group, such as myself, were tearing down posters. So I think at this point, as much as it's a great initiative, I don't see that it's necessary. If this starts to become a serious problem, then something like that I think is definitely a good initiative.
Alright, thank you. Ellie? Eamon?
So bearing in mind what Rowan just said, and that it is a purposefully vague motion, I think it just it lends even more credence to actually supporting the motion, in that it allows us to verbally and, if necessary, materially support groups that are already doing this work, and groups that have a real basis within the community already doing this work. Yeah.
Thank you. Ali?
It was kind of mentioned, but I just wanted to say that according to the Facebook page, because I'm just scrolling their thing, they're legit putting photos of where they put the posters, and it doesn't seem to be a recurrent thing. So I agree with what you said.
Alright, thank you very much. Is there any more discussion to be had on the motion? Alright, so we can move to a vote. So all those in favor of Kevin's motion, please raise your placards.
Do you want me to?
Does anyone want the motion to be read? Sure. Okay. We'll just reread it. Yeah. So everyone's on the same
Be it
page.
resolved that the CSU adopt the following position: that the CSU opposes the rise of fascism, and its current manifestation as the alt-right, both locally and internationally, and that the CSU support local groups which carry a similar mandate.
Alright, thank you. So all those in favor, please raise your placards. All those opposed? And any abstentions? 1. Was that 2, Julia?
Huh?
Is that an abstention?
Oh, it was yes.
Okay, perfect. All right, so the motion carries. Is there any more discussion to be had on motion against fascism?
No.
Eamon?
I just like my estimate.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, me too, actually.
Okay. With that, we are on point 8C, which is 10th strategic direction. And Julia, the floor is yours. Oh, sorry, Sally, did you have something to say before we moved on?
Yeah, I would like to be excused. I have morning, work early morning, so if it's possible to leave.
Okay, so we have a request for excusal from the remainder of the meeting. Rory?
Can we amend to add Eleanor as well later for the same reason?
Okay.
Just to do it together.
10:30.
Okay, so we have a request for excusal from Sally and Ali and Norm. Is that a second for you? Okay. Is there any discussion to be had? Okay, so all those in favor, please raise your placards.
Yeah.
16, all those opposed, and any abstentions? All right, perfect. So with that, we can move on to 8C, which is 10th strategic direction. Julia?
I move for the CSU to take a position on Concordia becoming a feminist university. I would like for this to be added to the positions book, And yeah, basically I wanted to say in the positions book that the CSU will support Concordia becoming a feminist university and for feminism to become the 10th strategic direction, and I'll motivate afterwards.
Okay, do the second. Kenny, your motivation?
Yeah, I think this is super important. At the past 2 meetings, like university-wide meetings I went to at my faculty council meeting and at Senate, it was brought up that Kimberly Manning, who is the principal of the Simone de Beauvoir Institute, has been trying to have Concordia's, like, they have a new campaign that's launching over 6 years in order to get donations from people, but big time donations from like companies and CEOs and that sort of thing. And she brought up the fact that since there are 29 like strategies that are being implemented in like themes, and that the 9 strategic directions are part of those, she was wondering if there could be a 30th like theme, or 10th strategic direction that would be feminism. And she was shut down like right away, basically by like the people who are in charge. And I expressed like my own support to her, and I think that it's crazy that Concordia claims to be a feminist university, but then like doesn't want it to be anywhere because they're afraid that like certain donors won't donate anymore. And I think that's like a really silly way of going about it. I think that the CSU has taken ample positions to making sure that feminism, among other ideologies, is broadcasted and disseminated, and that's what the students want. Most of our students are feminists, and that's what referendum questions show. So I think that if we adopt this position and we're able to stress that we want a 10th strategic direction because 9 is ugly and 10 is better, and we could have feminism right then and there, we would be like making a huge accomplishment because Concordia would become the first actual feminist university, and this would be a good way for us and for Concordia to put our money where our mouth is and really like claim that we're feminists and do something about it rather than just saying that we are and not doing anything. Yeah, not to like ramble or anything, but like feminism is very, very important, and if our Concordia-wide campaign that's going to happen over 6 years doesn't even talk about feminism, and some of our really important like female like heads of departments at Concordia are being shut down because they're like asking about feminism, something has to be done here, and I think a position is a great way to do it.
Great, thank you very much. So I have a speakers list of Ali, Eamon, and me. Rowan?
Yeah, I think it was me.
Yeah, that was Ali.
Well, one of you.
Could we like add maybe something to distinguish the 2 Ali?
Oh, my apologies.
That would be great.
Sorry.
I know, but I think Rowan.
Oh, sorry. Okay, Rowan. Okay, Rowan, Ali, Eamon, and then Kevin.
Could you post the motion to the group? I'm looking to make a small amendment, but I don't know how to word it because I don't remember the exact wording.
Maybe Caitlin, you could do it with the minute taker said, or like wrote.
Do you have the motion? Oh, there you go.
Thank you.
Just post it in the group.
Thank
you very much. Okay. Eleanor.
Yeah. I just wanted to mention that wouldn't a more like accepting strategy would be to be inclusive in general than rather focusing on one minority that might not be the only minority, because I feel like targeting one minority is excluding the others in a certain way. And if you say, oh, if Concordia claims to be a feminist university, aren't you closing off like certain fields of, I don't know, just like publicly claiming one field specifically, or just being like, why don't you also support the other? Why aren't you like, I don't know how to word that properly, but I hope my point gets through.
Okay, thank you. David?
I'd actually like to amend the motion, just amend it to be an explicitly trans-inclusive and intersectional feminist university.
Okay. Do we have a second? Asma? Can the amendment be considered friendly? Okay, so we're back on the speakers list. Sorry, do you want to motivate too?
I think that speaks for itself. I don't really feel motivate that.
Thank you. Kemi?
Yeah, I'm just slightly afraid that it might be just a statement kind of like in the air, and like no concrete action will take place following this statement. So I know like one of your point was that it was to permit the
principal of like the Cyber institution over there.
I could maybe clarify.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, basically the reason why I bring this up is because we don't have a position to make Concordia a feminist university, and the reason why I focused on feminist university is because Kim brought it up, which was something that like I picked up on at the meeting, and she was shut down right away. But if we do this, then it means that we'll have the legitimacy as academic caucus to bring it up at Senate and be like, hey, we support this and we want this to happen then and there. And then the representatives on Bob could do that as well. And then when we as counselors talk to people, we can say, hey, we have a position, we want to do something concrete in order to make this happen. And if the CSU has a position, that means the executives can try to add this into their mandates, and every role that they take or in their interactions with the university, they could try to advance this sort of notion. And then if one of the committees wants to take on a project to try to really further this, then it would work out, and then we could maybe have a campaign about this next year. So this is something that's like setting the ground, but right now the university is like saying that they're a feminist university, but they don't want to like have it written down anywhere. You know what I mean? So by having this position, we would be able to tell them, hey, you've been saying this like 500 times. There's a ton of interviews of Alan being like, oh, we're a feminist university, but then he doesn't want it to be anywhere on the Concordia website and stuff. It has to go through like a huge system of procedures that like has to be approved by Paul Joyce and Arts and Science at least, then the dean, then steering of Arts and Science Faculty Council, then it has to be approved by like 3 committees of Senate, then it has to go through actual Senate, then it has to go through Board of Governors that's made of a ton of like white guys who are CEOs. So it's just like, it'll help if CSU has a position.
Did you finish your thought? Yep. Okay. Michaela?
Yeah, I'd just like to say that for people who don't know, in the positions book there's a feminist point that's quite long. I'm just gonna like briefly read that it's CSU recognizes intersectional identities, create different marginalized experiences that are different. Women and gender nonconforming people experience different barriers based on class, ability, race, gender expression, religion, ethnicity, etc. So it is part of our values and our viewpoint. That said, I think it was mentioned that a strategic direction, it could be superficial, and it can be, but strategic directions go much further in depth. If it's one of the if it's one of the 10, it goes into quite a lot of committees and subcommittees to go into further of what that means and how that can be actually implemented. So I think what needs to happen is for policy or academic caucus to go further into this point and to give evidence to why this needs to be the case, because feminism is a very big word, and it's a whole field. There's many different perspectives on it, so we need to have a very concrete and very detailed report or evidence to bring to Senate or the appropriate place to put this forward, because otherwise I think it'll fall short. That is my suggestion.
All right, thank you. Ali?
I think she said.
Okay. Layla? Okay, so I have Reem, Asma, and then Julia.
Like what is exactly meant by first of all, the definition that we want to take position on, like the definition of feminism that we want to put there, and like I just want to know what would this bring if we have it on the positions book. So what actions would we have to follow if we added if we vote on this motion?
Direct response, yeah, Julia?
Okay, so basically I'm just gonna like try to explain briefly. The strategic directions are Concordia's game plan. Okay, so whatever they do, they're always like, oh, get your hands dirty, double your research, blah, blah, blah. And then they keep saying that they're a feminist university, but they're not actually implementing that. So if we have a position that follows with the position that Michaela like read out loud, that we already have in our positions book on feminism, firstly, the definition of that version of feminism is what we're going to continue to advance. So that's already been defined in our positions book. It's the universally accepted definition. We would gain from this that we have a position that we want Concordia to be a feminist university, and then as an action-based response, as CSU, what we can do is the executives could try to implement this in their mandates so that they could try to further the message. A committee, like Michaela suggested, policy committee, academic caucus, like I'm sure even student life committee could like partake in some like substantive way, even like sustainability committee, they could like write something up, like a report, or try to find research on that, so that then the CSU could take concrete action to tell the university, hey, like we see you saying that we're a feminist university everywhere, but you're not doing anything about it. Here are ways that we figured out together that you can do this. And then we'd also be supporting one of our principal institutes at Concordia that deals with like women's studies, understanding like gender and identity and that sort of thing. And then making all of Concordia, through its game plan, have concrete actions towards feminism. Because all of Concordia's projects are based on, oh, how can I fit this into the strategic directions? Say you have like, you come up with a research project on, I don't know, like composting, okay? They're gonna try to figure out where it fits in their strategic directions, and if it doesn't fit, like they don't need to look that deeply in each one. They're just like, oh, I wanna embrace the city, embrace the world. Does composting fit into that? Then they're gonna be like, yes or no, and that's how they decide. And sometimes they don't even think like further than their noses to figure out whether it fits or not. So if we add a 10th strategic direction and make it feminism, that would open the door to like intersectionality, sexuality, like all these different things that we could try to implement at the university, and that they've been shutting down continuously while saying that they're feminist. I don't know if like that was clear enough.
Did you have a follow-up?
Yes, just to before my question. So it's basically, since we have a position already, like everything you mentioned falls within the CCU's position on feminism. So what, just not to be redundant and to add another position to the positions book, and that might create confusion in the future. It's a great initiative, but isn't it already in the positions book? Isn't everything mentioned already like there? So what does that add? That's the question.
You want to directly respond?
So Sophia came up with that position last year. That position is very like inherent to the CSU's ideologies. The position that I'm proposing is for the CSU to encourage and pressure Concordia into becoming like the feminist university by making a 10th strategic direction feminism. So that means that Concordia will strive to be a feminist university, and the actionable point for them is adding a strategic direction and saying feminism under that. So this, like sometimes in the positions book, we have multiple positions that are on the same theme, but that have different aims. The one that we already have is just that, like among the variety of things that you could do with it, it's like, hey, we think that it's very important to be feminist, intersectional, like blah, 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 all the other things that are listed in the position that are very important. And this position complements that one in that it deals with the same topic, but the action-based response is very different. We want Concordia to be a feminist university, and so what we're saying in our positions book is that we want the 10th strategic direction to be feminism. This means the CSU in 5 years, for example, will look through its positions book and be like, hey, has this been done? Has this not been done? And if it hasn't been done, it means that they are mandated to continue this fight.
Thank you very much.
I really appreciate the spirit of this motion, and I think there's a lot of reasons to advocate towards the university to working towards having a better mandate, not just towards women, but to anyone in terms of identity politics. But that said, I don't think that this is necessarily where the CSU's role falls, to advocate for another strategic direction, which, as far as the CSU is concerned, is meaningless. The strategic direction doesn't guide the CSU and doesn't guide what we do. Our position book does, and our position book already exists. We already have reason to pressure the university to undertake, to do better and to undertake things to make the university a feminist university. I would also argue that the university will never be a feminist university in a global sense, because it ignores the fact that historically anyone but men has been excluded from academia. But that's a personal opinion. I think that as far as how to proceed with the intention of this, it's in finding the fact that feminism can already be considered existing within the strategic directions, such as in teaching for tomorrow and going beyond. I think there's lots of ways to prove to the university that they should already be caring about this, that this shouldn't be something that's brand new. And to put all of our energy towards advocating for the addition of something that is essentially meaningless is time spent away from projects that are actually about helping the communities that perhaps feminism as a strategic direction would advocate for. There are already many, I would say, projects or campaigns that are underway that support things like feminism, like our campaign for unpaid tuitions, which, as our campaign highlights, often disproportionately affects feminized fields. I think there's many, many ways that we can push this, and the point is very valid. But ultimately, I think there are more action-based ways to do this, and advocating for a strategic direction isn't one of them.
Thank you very much.
Julia and Layla have said covers most of it. Actually, no, I will say something I just realized. I think the project is very valuable. I mean, if it was taken on as something of its own, I think perhaps the space isn't the best here. I think there's a lot of work that can be done on a separate way to actually put those into actions and meaningful steps. I think reaching out on a global reach just to have something imposed on the university may be seen as a bit of an overstep. But I think there's meaningful, concrete steps we can do as part of our position, and initiate a process out of that. If the definition isn't comprehensive, we can revise that or add to it. That's one possibility. But I think as well, it's probably not the best place to discuss that conversation, which would be pretty nuanced too. And a gathering around this elsewhere would be even better. So that's just a suggestion.
Thank you very much. Julia?
Yeah, and honestly, I'm gonna be really straightforward. This is exactly what Alan Shepard did to Kimberly Manning. And this is what André Roy did to Kimberly Manning. The reason why the CSU exists is for its community to have access to certain things, and we currently have a position on feminism. And this is the right place to talk about it. We need to talk about it. Students have complained about it. The whole women's studies department is being underfunded because feminism is a priority in interviews, but it's not a priority set in stone. My motion was not written exactly the way I wanted, so I'm gonna repost exactly my motion. Basically, my motion is to add this to the positions book. The CSU will be mandated to pressure Concordia University to become a feminist university in action-based ways, including adding feminism as a 10th strategic direction, among other things. So I think that this is just something that we could be doing. Yes, feminism touches and teach for tomorrow, blah, blah, blah. This is exactly what was said at other meetings, but feminism, feminism plus all the other things that were mentioned by Eamon before, should be their own strategic direction so that the university's strategic goals and plans can give money to this. They focus on research that's in the sciences that has to do with animals and other things and math, and they don't fund in a proportional way to projects that have to deal with equity, equality, feminism. So this is why it's important for the CSU to have a position to do this. If we don't have a position to do this, senators can't necessarily bring this up at Senate or at Board of Governors and be hey, all of council agrees this is something that we have as a position, and we want you to do it. Our other position is good, but it's not precise enough for what I think we should be doing as a board. Our role is really to implement things, and talking about it and talking about it and talking about it is fine, but if we have it there, then we can actually do something and talk about it and research things so that we could be prepared for the future. I think the time is now, and shutting this down I think is not a good idea, because it's always shut down. People are shut down, and I really appreciate what Layla said. I think it's very relevant, but I think that we also have a duty to our students to make sure that we bring this stuff up and that we have it in our positions book.
Thank you very much. Kenny?
Yeah, I prefer much more the position you just put, much more than stating that Concordia is a feminist university. Because I feel that could go against us at one point. They will be able to say it without it being true. Yeah, that's all.
Was that an official changing of the motion? Sorry, Julia.
I had the motion already, but like I didn't send it, and I guess it got lost because like what was posted was my motivation, and what was posted as my motion was not what I like, what I wrote down that I said. So I'm just gonna repost it.
Yeah, it's better if you just because sometimes like when people are talking, there's ifs and ums and buts that end up in the motion, and then if you're writing it down, it ends up sounding a little bit funny.
Yeah,
so.
for sure. I just reposted it for everyone.
Okay, can everyone consider the amendments friendly? Okay.
Can we repeat? Oh, this amendment?
Yeah, just like the little changes that Julia made.
And Rory posted a really relevant document about how the university is saying that it's like a feminist university, but then doesn't want to like concretely like take on what Kim has said there.
Right, thank you. Just to clarify, there's a couple of people doing this. Eleanor, were you trying to be on the speakers list? Okay, and you were trying to be on the speakers list? Okay, there we go. Rory?
Yes. So she stole my thunder, but I did post something because this was a little bit confusing when I got it. We have a position, that's great. How is this different? I was a little bit confused as to how this was different from the position that we had. So when I Googled Concordia plus feminism and found this, we have a professor at Concordia who's already said like they've gone through this article of what would a feminist university be. So I felt that was pretty relevant for us to maybe read if you don't have the context. I found it useful. I think there's some confusion. I felt some confusion around the table because we're trying to take a position on mandating Concordia to do something, to say that this is a strategic direction. And I think we have a position supporting feminism, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we want Concordia to say the same thing. So there's some differences there in terms of what Julia wants is for Concordia to be more vocal about it and to sort of commit in a tangible way to actually say that they're gonna go for it. So I think instead of motioning that we take a position on this, because we already have a position on it, is that we move to encourage, we move to promote, we move to push the administration, we move to advocate for, we move to mandate our advocacy coordinator, find another way to say, convince the school to adopt what we want, instead of motioning that they're going to adopt what we want. You know what I mean? We can't motion that they're going to add it as a strategic pillar. We can motion that we can try and get them to do it. Mm-hmm. But if we motion that we're going to make them do it, we're never going to succeed, they're never going to succeed. So I think there's maybe some middle ground of not taking a position, but saying, we're moving forward on this. And moving forward is getting the university to try and change this.
If you read it though,
yeah.
That's
your second motion was much more clear than the first one, yes.
Yeah, the one I had written down is exactly what Rory said.
Okay, so the new one's in the Facebook group. And Michaela, the floor is yours.
Yeah, so if people read the positions with policy or position on feminism, it's quite thorough, and I don't think we need to rush into having another position. I think this is really something to do for academic caucus or policy, and I think it's important that we go beyond the CSU towards the university to, push to integrate this into the strategic directions. I think that, we shouldn't rush into anything. We should have a deeper discussion about how we should move forward and get the university's attention with a very concrete plan, because we can't just throw around that word because it can be empty. And I think we should end the conversation right now because I think it is very important, but we need to go about this the right way, and this is such a big setting to do this kind of topic. So I think it should be done for academic caucus. And
Great, thank you. Ali?
No, honestly, I just want to move for a vote to talk about this in another place or something. We're just going around in a circle, and that's just we have other things to discuss, and this is not going anywhere.
Was that a motion or a?
Yeah.
Was it a motion to table or to vote?
Well, to table, I would say
Okay. Do we have a second? Asma, do you want to motivate?
No, I think just this going all around is not going anywhere, and I believe that we have to just end this because I don't know. I feel like she doesn't really understand what the strategic directions are for.
Excuse me, that's out of order. You can't assume things about me. You don't know me.
Okay. We're just gonna. Sorry, I'm just having a tiny little chair memory blank. If we need to very embarrassing one, discuss on a table?
I think we were on a...
Yes, we do. No, sorry, we don't need to debate on a table. So if there's a motion on the table, we have to vote on it currently. So all those in favor of tabling the motion, please raise your placard. So that means discussing it at a later date, or did you want to set a date for it?
Like next council meeting.
Okay.
Or even like what she said actually,
No. Okay. Sorry, there was a point of information, Camille?
Yeah, are we just like table it to next meeting without anything happening in between, or there's something on the table?
Yeah, this wasn't very specific.
It's just, I feel like this conversation isn't really, like, okay, we haven't all read this article that right now has been presented to us. That's number one. Number two, I feel like we're going in a circle on what each person likes or dislikes, which is great, but it's the same stuff being said on and on again. And I feel like there's stuff that must be considered, like the writing itself of this motion, and we shouldn't go really quick with this, especially that we already have something written down about this. And it's nothing against the motion itself, it's just making sure that this motion is going to the right direction and not just a motion for motion.
Okay, so we have a motion on the floor to table it to next council. Which...
Rory wants to amend, but can't amend a table.
Yeah, you can amend a table. I'd just like this to be a little bit more collaborative in its existence, because I don't want this to come back next council and then we do the exact same thing. So if there's a better suggestion, Rory?
Yeah, I have a suggestion. To find some sort of compromise here, I hear two things. Julia wants something done now and thinks that there's a priority to have something done now. She wants some action now. It's been it's been a long time. Okay? In order to satisfy that need and satisfy the need for the rest of councillors to feel like this can be discussed at length, they can review things in advance, they can think about it more, they can come to a better solution, they can, etc. Why don't what we do to get some results right now is put a 3-person working group together and mandate them to work on this issue with Julia before next council. So that at least then there is 3 people who are interested in doing this. Put them together with Julia, you guys come together, work on this a little more, work out the issues, talk about it, come up with solutions, and then come back. And then that way we're not debating it without reading, we're not debating without knowing, and we can still feel like there's action on what possibilities are there.
Okay. I'm going to move on because there's a bunch of speakers that were on the list, so I don't want to deprioritize them. I'm just not going to accept the table because I know that this is going to come back next week and we're going to do the same thing, so I don't want to leave without us at least knowing where we're going to send this to. Are we all okay with that? Yeah. Okay, Rowan, you were next.
Yep. I motion to send this to Academic Caucus.
There we go. Do we have a second? Veronica? Rowan, your motivation?
So this does essentially very similar to what Rory has suggested. This sends it to Academic Caucus. They can create a plan like Michaela suggested, or if they think that a more thorough policy needs to be drafted, they can simply, I believe Asma is the chair of both Academic Caucus and policy and can easily just encourage people to shift it over, and then a policy can be drafted by policy committee. We're not getting anything done in this room. There's too many people in this discussion. Doing it like this will just be much more efficient.
Okay, I have a bit of speakers list to send it to Academic Caucus of Asma, Julia, and then Peter.
Yeah, I just wanted to take in what Rory said. I think the idea of having a working group is a good one. I wouldn't necessarily send it straight to caucus. I think if the working group could submit something to the policy committee to review, and then once the details have been finalized, we can actually send it to the academic caucus to strategize how to enforce that. That makes more sense. It's more progressive, and it's also there's more of a pathway around that. The discussions have been had, and it's not up for discussion further on in quite the same way, but more about strategizing. It would be more helpful to the process, I think, both at policy and at caucus to do that. Okay. So having perhaps a working group, then go to policy and then to caucus.
Julia?
Yeah, I agree with that completely. It should go to policy because academic caucus can't really do anything about it. I move to send this to.
There's already a motion on the table.
I amend it then. I want to amend it to switch academic caucus to policy committee and make ASMA the main reference for it. And I would like to be invited to that meeting of policy committee and to have that added to the motion. And have it ready by the next council, yeah.
I will accept the part about it being sent to policy. The rest is just logistics to work out. There's no need to move that. So is an amendment send it to policy instead of academic caucus friendly, or is there any dissent?
Quick question.
Yes, Asma?
Does that mean there's a working group created, or does that mean that it's just sent straight?
With the motion is just policy.
Just policy?
Yeah.
And if policy wants to create a working group, that's perfect.
Okay, is everyone okay with the amendment to change academic caucus to policy? Yeah. Okay, perfect. So that we can move back to the speakers list, which was Peter.
For compromise.
Yes, I just want to say something because I was kind of agree with Rowan saying, Rowan saying like we should put like 3 people working on this because like the problem right now that we can send to the higher level either caucus or the political science, but like none of the students is going to listen on this because like whatever they have done, but the students only come to us because they only think that we are the one that beyond them. So like I really think that if there's any possible ways, I mean I understand that there's sometimes that we cannot use our power to do stuff, but like I do think that at this moment, because this has really been going for a long time, and the students really like wanted something to be done, so if we could do something not using our power, but then also doing something for them, that would be the best solution instead of really sending to the people who are above us, either to the political complex or the curriculum.
Okay, thank you very much. So the motion on the table is to refer to policy. Michaela? Okay, there's no one else on the speakers list. So if nobody else wants to add themselves, I'll just say we can move to the vote. So all those in favor of referring this to policy, please raise your placards. 12, all those opposed? 1, and any abstentions? 1. Perfect. So that motion carries, and yes?
Can I just remind people that like when we have heated discussions, it's really good to give our opinion, but like assuming things is never okay.
All right, thank you very much. That is noted and will be respected. Moving on to the agenda is if there's nothing else to be discussed in 10th strategic direction, we can go on to 8D, which is CAF Standing Regulation Amendment, and Asma, the floor is yours.
Yeah, so I've been contacted by Elise, who's a member at large, who was...
oh, sorry, do you mind just starting with the motion?
Sorry, oh yeah. So the motion is to have every check, requisition, or any other disbursement of monies from the Community Action Fund must be signed by 2 members of the committee.
Right.
This is all I have. There's a documentation that was sent through in relation to what section that applied to, towards the end, 243. And yeah, so the committee would like to recommend an amendment to the standing regs governing the CAF, which the addition of 1 article precising who has signing authority. It's something that was supposed to happen last year but fell through the cracks. The amendments in red in the documents are what are applicable. We were recommended to have that presented at policy committee. However, policy committee couldn't meet prior to council, and since it would affect the signature of check recs, it was required that we just come straight. It was something that was already discussed last year too. So the motion is just to have every check rec, any other disbursement of money from Community Action Fund be signed by 2 members of the committee. So
do we have a second? Rowan? Was that your motivation, Asma?
I included it. I should have waited.
It's okay. All right. Is there any discussion to be had on the motion? Okay. So all those in favor of Asma's motion, please raise your placards. 9 and 10. All those opposed? And any abstentions? 1. Perfect. So the motion carries. Is there anything else to be discussed on CAF standing regulation? All right, so with that, we can move on to 8E, which is a closed session point. And it's asking us, yes, Rowan?
I motion to go into closed session.
Okay, do we have a second? Michaela, all those in favor of moving into closed, please raise your placards. 7, all those opposed? 0, abstentions, 1. All right, so I'll just ask anyone that's not council executive, JB, chair, or myself to leave the room, please. And we'll call you back in when we move into open session. We're back in session. Julia?
I move to ratify the minutes of closed session.
Okay, do we have a second? Okay, all those in favor of ratifying closed, please, and please put up your placards. 8, 9, 10, all those opposed, and any abstentions? 1. Perfect. Okay, so since there's no more discussion on this topic, we'll move to 8F, which is accessibility. And Reem, your motion, please. Sorry, your Reem, your accessibility motion.
Point of information, have these positions from like the last council meeting from last year been added to the positions book? Because I think I made one about accessibility. Just a question. Last year I made a ton of positions, like I passed a ton of positions at the last council meeting of the year, and I was wondering if they were added to the positions book, because I remember writing out a position on accessibility and also the right to die and all that stuff, and I don't know if it's available on the CSU website or if that version's not accurate.
Do we have a direct, either ask or Michaela?
From what I know, like if you look online, there's kind of multiple versions, and you might see the first one that comes up is an older version.
Okay.
You have to put in like a very specific search in Google if you want to look in Google, but I didn't specifically look at the accessibility one, and I don't remember us voting officially on the right to die.
You were absent at the last one.
Okay.
Yeah, just to clarify, I spoke with Asma. There's a little thing in the standing regulations that says every time that a position is made, it has to come back at the next council, but it's like really small and in the standing regs hidden somewhere, so nobody ever knows about it. So anyways, I reminded her it'll come back next meeting. It's all good. Not a problem.
Sort of point of information.
Yep.
So does that mean that the right to die position we added before is coming back today?
It should have come back today,
okay.
But like I said, because it's kind of hidden in there and nobody really knows about it, it'll come back next meeting. So.
Yep. Would it be possible for the IT person to make it easier to find the real positions book? Because it's confusing if we have multiple versions.
I can send them an email about that, or ask, since I am already sending them an email about server things, I'll just tack it on.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Reem, the floor is yours.
Okay, so just to clarify, I checked in the positions book, the one that's available, and I didn't find any position on accessibility. So I'll start with the first one, which is the one about independent students. So whereas CSU represent all undergraduate students at Concordia, whereas independent students don't have a seat in CSU 2017-2018 council, whereas independent students don't have a faculty association, and whereas independent students don't have a channel to voice their concerns, be it resolved that the appointment committee gives priority to independent students to sit on the student at-large positions at the CSU's committees.
Yes.
I'm so sorry, Reem. The agenda point was accessibility. I think independent students, your motions are in the same document, but it's the next agenda point, right?
It was just the one on accessibility that goes with this point.
Do you want to?
Yeah, please, sorry.
So the accessibility motion is as follows. So whereas the CSU is the representative student union that promotes the educational, political, recreational, and cultural interests of all its members, whereas not all Concordia buildings are accessible to all undergraduate students, whereas many of these buildings are used by student groups and associations, and whereas some of the CSU clubs or associations have offices located at these buildings, whereas accessibility to these buildings hinders the ability of students with special needs to be active in these associations, be it resolved that the CSU asks Concordia administration to make these buildings accessible for all students.
We have a second. Omar, your motivation, and then I'll move on to speakers list.
So it's basically, as mentioned in the motion, that some of the buildings here are not all Concordia buildings are accessible, especially the ones that are given to associations. So association offices are actually, most of them, the ones that I'm familiar with, are not accessible to students with special needs. And it was also brought up at some point during previous meeting that when we were discussing buildings, it was brought up as a reason why not to go with a certain option, is that because it would cost more money, whereas I think it's important to incorporate all these students, even if it would mean to cost more money to accommodate the students that need a different type of access.
Thank you. Rory?
I'd just like to comment, I'm really happy that this has been brought forward. Had you not done it, I probably would have in a little while. It's something people probably know I'm passionate about. I myself have had an issue a couple years ago where I was trying to make an appointment in one of these buildings and couldn't. And I had to go through the Concordia administration and Dean of Students and say, I can't access this place, why not? And ACSD was, let's say, less cooperative. So I know as a student registered with Concordia's Department for Students with Disabilities that there's things they can and can't do, and oftentimes when they say no, there's easy ways to go around it, easy ways to fix it. And I'd like to see more of this happen on campus. So I really like that we're supporting this, that we're putting it as a position, and that we should call on Concordia to make those changes. Even things like giving students access keys to the elevator, or access keys, be it in the MB building or in the hall building. It is a nightmare to get keys for those reserved elevators. And there's things with students who don't need to that take them, and it's not reserved in any way, but this is a really good first step. So I just want to voice my support in that context. Thank you.
Right, thank you. Jeff?
Was Reem's motion sent through email, or?
It was sent out today as one of the last documents, I believe. Oh, and it's also on the Facebook group. Thank you. Next, I have Julia.
Yeah, I also wanted to echo, I think it's really important, especially in the annexes, because a lot of Concordia programs are located there, and there's people who can't take classes, say in the philosophy building, and not all of the classes are moved to the hall building. So it's difficult, and also for office hours for professors don't change their location based on you. You have to make an appointment, and it's really complicated to make an appointment because some of them have other jobs. So this is a great first step, and it's something that really, really needs to be taken seriously. Also, I think maybe Omar would be able to answer this. The CSU daycare, is it completely accessible even on the outside?
As far as around goes, not at the moment. But we can look into it, and actually that is an addition I would like to see.
Yeah, that's perfect then. If we make sure that it goes through the daycare as well.
Thank you. Okay, so speakers list is done. If there's nothing else, we can move to a vote. So all those in favor of the accessibility motion, please raise your placards. 13, all those opposed, and any abstentions. 1. Thank you very much. So the motion carries. Yes, you may. All right, so with that, we're on to 8G, which is independent students. And the floor is yours, Reem. It's the first motion.
Okay, do you want me to repeat that? Just saying, I'm posting this one.
Oh, perfect. Yeah. Okay, so they're going to get posted in the group.
So for my second motion, whereas CSU represents all undergraduate students at Concordia, whereas independent students don't have a seat in CSU 2017-2018 Council, and whereas independent students don't have a faculty association, whereas independent students don't have a channel to voice their concerns, be it resolved that the appointment committee gives priority to independent students to sit on the student at-large positions at the CSU's committees.
All right, do you have a second? Omar, your motivation, Reem?
So basically, this is just a way to give independent students like more chance, a way to organize since they don't have a faculty. So they're not necessarily have the right channels to get their voices across or to have information about what's available to them. So giving them priority to sit on the committee seats is just a way maybe to try to give some structure or to help them, to guide them towards these things.
Thank you.
Yeah. Can the motion please be posted on Facebook?
Oh,
yes.
Yeah, there you go. I saw a placard around the Okay. So we'll just give Reem a second. That way we can all see it before voting. There we go. Okay, so I'll give you guys just like 30 seconds to look it over, 20 seconds. Is there any discussion to be had on the motion? Yes, Awatif and then Michaela.
It's a point of information for a student at large. I mean, I sit on appointments, but it would be great if we could clarify this. For requirements for students to apply for student at large, isn't there a requirement that you need to be a full-time student? It's open to part-time.
Do you want to clarify?
Yeah, independent students can be full-time students, and I don't know if that's a requirement, but I don't think it's particularly relevant to this motion. Independent students are students that don't fall under any one faculty.
Okay.
All right. Okay, so all those in favor of the motion, please raise your placards. 12. All those opposed. And any abstentions? 1. All right, so the motion carries. I received a request for a recess, so I'm going to call a 10-minute recess. If we could all be back here by 10:58, that would be excellent. Make this as expedient as possible. I received requests for excusal from Devin, who wasn't feeling well, and also from Gabby, who has to leave. So if they want to be excused, yeah, Rowan?
I motion to excuse Gabby and Devin.
Okay, do we have a second? Camille? All those in favor of excusing Gabby and Devin's absences, please raise your placards. 12. All those opposed? And any abstentions? Perfect. Okay, so at this point we are on 8H, which is bog seat. And Veronica?
Okay, so whereas Asma was appointed to the Board of Governors at the June regular council meeting, whereas Asma resigned from the position, whereas the executive committee chose to appoint Leila to sit on the Board of Governors, be it resolved that council ratified the executive committee's decision to appoint Leila Sutherland to the Board of Governors.
Okay, do we have a second? Ali? Your vote is Veronica?
Yeah, so we got a resignation and we need to appoint another executive, and we chose Leila as she is the best fit.
Alright, thank you very much. Is there any discussion we have on this agenda point? Okay, so all those in favor, please raise your placards. 13, all those opposed, and any abstentions? 1. Perfect. Okay, so if there's no more discussion on bog seat, we can move on to 8I, which is SUDS, and Rowan, the floor is yours.
I believe it was originally an informational point of someone else's, so if whoever was going to speak about that wants to speak about the report.
Omar? In that case, it's yours.
So we had attended recently a conference at the University of British Columbia that was organized by the AMS, which is the Alma Mater Society. Our purpose to go to UBC was to look at their way of doing or operating the health and dental plan, which is something that we have in our contract to aspire towards. Other than that, they do have a new student union building that serves as their answer to the demand for student space from their constituents. And the last thing was the Student Union Development Summit itself, which is a conference where there are delegates from almost 40 universities and large colleges around Canada. So they were there for 4 days. So the first 2 days we had met with the AMS themselves, and we discussed a lot of the way that they're doing things, their best practices. We discussed thoroughly the process that they went through for their student union building. We also thoroughly discussed and met with their consultant and administrator for the health and dental plan. And there were several workshops that we attended for the conference itself.
All right, Roy?
Yeah, so I think that it's important to express this, or to discuss this document, because I think that it's very much a flawed document. I think there's a lot of issues with it. And rather than going point by point, just to go over two large issues that I see throughout this document. First of all, it's for the most part very vague. It just names an idea, gives a 3-line blurb, and then doesn't actually give any details about, you know, it talks about how other associations have done this. It doesn't say how, it doesn't say the process, it doesn't explain any of this. It just says other associations have, you know, less executives, or other executives, or whatever it may be, and it doesn't actually discuss this at length. Another overall issue, and I think that this is just a lack of understanding on behalf of the people who wrote this, is understanding the difference between student associations in Quebec and outside of Quebec and the rest of Canada, because there's a huge difference. Quebec has what's called the accreditation laws. They are the only province or state in North America, at least between the US and Canada, to have these laws. And what these essentially mean is that when we have our funding, if we annoy the university, if we piss off the university cannot cut our funding. If they do, we take them to criminal court and we sue them to pieces. In any other part of Canada, the university can cut the association's funding at any point. And even if it's never done, this is held as a trump card. So imagine essentially knowing that at any point, if you annoy Concordia administration, they will destroy this association because they will cut its funding and we'll essentially internally collapse. This is what things are like outside of the province, and because of that, because these laws were passed like way back in the 60s or 70s, Quebec's student associations have evolved in a very different manner, and they're much stronger, and they are able to do much more and in very different ways than outside of Canada. And the different points that are brought up throughout this document, I think a lot of them show a lack of understanding of the reason for why we're doing things differently from the other associations that were met at this conference. So I take up the example of relationship with university. We at times have very good relationships with the university. I take, for example, the daycare, which was a co-project between the CSU and the university, which paid for a large part of it. This is a project that we were working towards together. Other times we oppose the university. I take, for example, international student tuition hikes, where we organize a protest outside of it. Many other student associations that are across the country, even the student association in the town I'm from, would not do that. They would not be able to do that because they would be worried about pissing off the university. And I think this is an inherent flaw throughout this document. Other flaws to briefly mention, the health and dental plan is extensive and it's for the most part correct, but this is no new information. I sat on the health and dental plan committee last year, the RFP committee. This is all stuff we knew already. There's 2 pages talking about student space. Again, this is just further pushing the idea of buying the 2055 Bishop Street. I may have gotten that number wrong. That was brought up earlier at council, and I think it's just an extension of continuing to try to push that on council. I think this document is very flawed, and I want that to be clear.
All right, so I have a speakers list of Sule, Rory, Michaela, Julia, and then Omar.
Sure. I just kind of want to address a couple of points that you mentioned. Specifically that Quebec is different than the rest of Canada. We understand that, and actually McGill and UDM, their student unions also went to this conference. So the idea, and I'm just going to pull up the Student Union Development Summit page, where it basically, their goal is to bring together a bunch of different universities and groups, not only to look at the processes, you know, administratively, but also internally. What? Okay, all right. Anyway, that's one thing. The other thing about the relationship with the university, that was just something that like we saw what was worth commenting about. But the structure of the fee levies you didn't mention, the number of employees you didn't mention, the number of executives you didn't mention, the strategic plan that a lot of these associations take on you didn't mention, and where is it? The student building isn't something that we're trying to push on council. It's something that we had brought up at council and said we would discuss further, right? So the information that we have here is to be able to keep having those discussions because it's a project that we feel would benefit the students. As we had said before, there's a lack of space. It's not necessarily for the 2055 Bishop acquisition. And where is it? The health and dental stuff, the RFP process, so basically, okay, the health and dental stuff that the UBC does, that the AMS does, they have a contract with ASEC, which is the organization that we have a contract with, except they have their services in-house and they also have a different cost and refund accounting system. So we went to look at how they're operating because in our current contract with ASEC that was signed last year, there is the option to move these services in-house. So we wanted to see how they do that and like what are the benefits and potential downsides. They're mentioned here, and one of the big ones is that moving services in-house would not only create jobs for students to be able to man these posts, but also it would also decrease our costs and decrease and increase the revenues that the CSU makes by decreasing the revenues that ASEC makes as a fee. I think that for now, that's all I'm going to say, and Omar and I have actually like written a big like statement and stuff like that. So.
Thank you very much. Rory?
It's interesting that you mentioned the schedule and the things that they cover at this conference, because a lot of the topics that are covered on the schedule for SUDS are sustainability, student life, clubs, those types of things. So when I look at the schedule here, I wonder why the sustainability coordinator or the club's student life coordinators didn't go. I'm also concerned when you mentioned that, and specifically in this report, one of your big takeaways is that we should have a strat plan. I find it sort of ironic seeing as both you and Omar sat on CASA last year.
I'm just going to remind everyone to address the chair, please.
Okay, where Sule and Omar sat on CASA last year, where they have strategic planning process in place, where people like myself harped on it, and it had been implemented while they were there. So you don't need to go to a conference in BC to know that a student group should have a strategic plan, or even how to do one. I created a workshop for CASA on how to strategic plan for student groups. And Sule and Omar were both on CASA when that happened. So I just don't understand why one of the big benefits of going to this conference is somehow that we've come to this realization we need a strat plan. That's not necessarily a question. I'm just wondering, it is listed under the workshops attended by some of the CSU representatives. It is missing the keynote workshop from the schedule. And I notice on the SUD schedule that the keynote workshop is given by the ASEC rep, and doesn't say what it's on. Doesn't say what it's on, but it's a keynote given by the ASEC rep. So I'm just concerned when you talk about going to this conference to learn about how they work their health and dental plan, and you don't say that you've attended this conference. Have you attended that workshop? Yep. Did you go for that workshop? Was that workshop why you went?
Yeah.
Okay, so we went for from, give me just a second, August 16th to August 20th. The conference was from August 18th to August 21st. August 21st being just when people leave, right? The days that we were there prior to the conference were really to meet up with AMS, which is UBC's student union, and look at how they do their stuff internally, meet with their executives, and we also had a meeting with ASEC and them to discuss how they do their health plan and stuff like that. The health plan, there was a part of the, so part of the keynote that Mr. Berkman gave had some stuff to do with the health plan, but the keynote was really just more of a motivator for, get involved and go out there and have big projects and try to get them done. The workshops that we have, so on page 2 of our report, we said some of the workshops attended by CSU representatives. We didn't include the keynote speeches in that, there were a couple. We also, I've already reached out to AMS for the slide decks for all the workshops, and they're working on getting them from their speakers as well. And that was in order to be able to share with the rest of the executives. Now, the executives that attended, we had a conversation with the other execs and decided internally who should be going to this workshop and to this conference. As for the strategic planning stuff, yes, you're right, Omar and I were on CASA and saw the strategic planning committee. However, we saw there was a lack of it for the CSU and wanted to acknowledge that like other schools and unions have a strategic planning committee that's made up of a similar design to the one we have in our report, as well as what we want to do now is implement this committee, but also reach out to other student unions to see how they develop their committee. Most of it was through referendum and like on an ongoing basis, which is part of our recommendation. But we wanted more detail, so we're still in touch with other schools to see how they're doing that. Does that answer your questions? Do you have other?
Did you have a follow-up?
Yeah, if I'm allowed to follow up, I just, again, I bring it back to why you had to go to BC in order to learn that. Like, there are other student groups in Quebec. If you want to know how other student groups use strat plans or strategic planning in general, why can't we look inside the province or even in Ontario? That was my direct response to direct response to my question. I have more questions, but I think it's appropriate if I put the placard back up.
Yeah, I'll give you a direct response and then we'll move on.
Sure. Basically, we had the opportunity to meet different schools across Canada, and we wanted to look at how they do things and not just focus on Quebec.
Thank you. Michaela?
Yeah, so I have a big issue with the way things are worded and the language and the kinds of things that are being added to this document. Basically, the union is not a business, and it's said that in page 4, that the strategic plan should be constructed the same way as a business. I think that's very dangerous because we're supposed to be advocating for students and we're not at all trying to find some way of means about income. So I think you should really be careful.
The chair, please.
Sorry, be careful with the wording of these kinds of documents. And I think it's a very one-sided document, especially when it's talking about merging the two, having a smaller amount of executive team members, and then in addition to having now a hierarchical structure when there's been so much work that's been put into implementing this structure, and you really aren't showing a two-sided argument. You're saying that it's very confusing, and there's a lot of organizations that use this structure, so it's very simplified, and it's not sharing, or I guess you're not looking into perhaps how these methods actually work. And yes, it's very simplified, and the point in another simplified version of why I think coordinators are very important and a non-hierarchical structure is that all voices are heard, and it's a collaborative process. And I think I'll just say that for now.
Thank you. Julia?
Yeah, so a few things to say. Firstly, in order to function well as a board, we need to make sure that we're transparent and accountable with each other. I think that we all, as counselors, appreciate executives making collective decisions together to attend conferences. My concern here is not the conference. Like, I really don't care about where you went, what you did. I don't care. What I care about is the cost of this, because it's outrageous, and the fact that these gifts were taken by like some random CEO guy that is associated with the CSU through a health and dental plan. Like, this kind of looks like a bribe, and it was taken without the CSU's council's consent. So I feel like because like the executive was appointed to represent the CSU, like this stuff needs to be taken really seriously, because we have measures in place to deal with this. I think if you know that you have a conference coming up, it's usually like you have a significant time to plan for it, and you should talk about it at a council meeting. And if you don't have time to talk about it at a council meeting, you could call a special council meeting. And if that doesn't work, you could use your executive decree. Like, using your executive decree means that, like, you discussed it as an executive. We have mechanisms in place to deal with this, and I think having taken this is not okay, because like, we have rules and regulations to make sure that the CSU continues to do its job and function properly, and this just defeats the whole purpose of it. And clearly, like, according to Veronica's facial expressions, like, this is not something that was discussed as an executive, and it was not, like, consensual, and I don't see any minutes of executive meetings, like, in our documents. So I think firstly, we should have executive meeting minutes. Like, I want to see what you're talking about in your meetings. I just found out about this today after Caitlin resent me the emails. Like, I don't think that having this sort of information circulating, finding out like way after the fact that you were in BC for 5 days when the conference was supposed to be 3 days, that you like have $1,000 of costs that you want to be paid by the CSU. Like, this is just like so much information all at once, and I think that like it's not okay to do this, and we are holding you accountable right now as a board, and we don't expect this behavior to continue for the future. I think like if you want to go somewhere, then you need to plan for that, and you need to talk to your executive about it. The only way an executive works is if people have discussions and talk about things together and agree on things together. And after like what Rory said, I went on the website of the conference earlier, and yeah, like they had a workshop there that I think would have been super beneficial to Devon. Like, and the whole point of this is not where it is, it's the fact that it's expensive, you're accepting a gift, and like the workshops that were attended, yes, I'm sure like you learned something, and I'm happy you learned something, and I'm sure you're gonna bring value back to the CSU. It's just in front of me. Like, it doesn't matter who went, it's just the fact that it wasn't decided collectively, and that council was just told about it after. That's like kind of rude, and I think if we want the CSU to continue working, like we need to be transparent with each other. Like, if you don't have time to call a special council meeting, we have a group on Facebook. Like, people could write there. I write there. Like, I'm sure I'm really annoying, but I'm getting my points across. Like, people can do the same thing. I just think that we need to figure out a way for things to work, and I would like to hear from the other executives here, like how this decision was made, and like what your thoughts are on it, because we're trying, like, we hear this from other people. I heard this from other people, and like and then I'm sent this random document. Like, I don't think that's fine. And the CSU, like, our standards are higher than this. Like, we're above this kind of behavior, and it's not okay.
Thank you. Omar?
Allison, put me at the end of the list again, please.
Okay. Rowan?
Yeah, I'm gonna ask that we're kind of straying focus here, so I'm gonna ask that we talk about one thing at a time. I didn't put my motion first forward so that we could discuss the document. And the last point was kind of straying and not discussing directly what was in the document. I was hoping that we could actually discuss the content first, and that's what I am going to continue to do. So just to respond to a couple things that Sule said. First of all, they stated that I didn't go through all the points. I wanted to allow other people to talk, but I'm happy to do that. That. Second of all, just to comment on the health and dental, I didn't criticize what was in the health and dental plan. I simply said there's no new information. Having sat on that RFP committee that you referenced, that the finance coordinator referenced, this is all stuff that we knew. The new jobs, the decreased costs, the increased revenues, none of this is new. In fact, it's actually, sorry, I lost my place. It's actually poorly implemented in this document, which is confusing because the general manager that went on this trip with you also sat on that committee with me. But it talks about having this handled by ASEC, the staffing and management. That was not what's in the best interest. That's not what we discussed back in March on that committee, because it actually increases, it doesn't decrease the revenues because the revenues are still going to ASEC. We want to manage this ourselves. So like, there are problems with the health and dental plan. It's also no new information. There are problems with what was stated about the health and dental plan, but it's also no new information. To go over some of the other issues, number of executives, technically the CSU could function no problem without a Loyola coordinator, without a sustainability coordinator, but we are greatly advantaged by having someone whose sole focus is sustainability. We are greatly benefited by having someone whose sole focus is to include the Loyola campus. So yes, we can decrease the number of executives. We absolutely should not, because this includes very important parts of our mandate. This includes more students, et cetera, et cetera. Structure, Michaela already discussed. I agree with what she said, so I'm not going to bother repeating it. Relationship with university, I've already discussed. Online voting, there's a lot of issues with online voting. Makes it easier to cheat because essentially any electronic device is turned into a voting booth. So I could walk around with an iPad and say, hey, I'm running for this election, you should vote for me, enter your student information right now. As well, I can reference the GSA, who almost had their last general elections completely discredited because of online voting. In fact, when you were in BC, I believe UBC has had some very serious issues with online voting as well. Yeah, I think that covers most of it. Sorry? Oh, and right, fee levies. Yeah, the fee levy system, that sounds like an absolute mess to implement, first off, because you'd essentially have to have a referendum question on every fee levy to change it, which is not a good idea. That would be an awful election, and I pity the CEO that has to do that. Furthermore, as a system, I don't think it actually makes much more. You're paying a percentage of your tuition. Saying that you should instead pay a flat fee doesn't make as much sense to me.
Okay, thank you. Eamon?
I rescind.
Okay, Sule?
Okay. Okay, so let's go over some of the stuff you just said. I just want to address kind of points that everybody's been bringing up. The point of this document isn't to push an agenda. It's literally just to look at what others are doing, comment on it, and then have that discussion at a council level. None of the stuff that we experienced, none of the stuff that we said or did had any decision-making power whatsoever. It was literally just for information so we could relay it to council and have that discussion together. And I think Omar has more stuff to say about the rest of it.
Thank you. Ali?
So there's also another point on the document about keeping the CSU academic academic and professionally focused, which is also a little problematic because we are also, and that comes back to the accredited point at the beginning, and it just has to do with we are here to protect the students, we are here to stand for the students, and this is the point of all this. This is the point of why each and every one of us is here, and that's why we were voted here. And I believe that it is very important that our mandate is not only that, yes, we focus on academics, and yes, we focus on creating careers for the students, but we also focus on protecting them within this environment because this is our environment at this moment. And so just focusing on these two things really brings the CSU away from its accredited role and just into, it just weakens it. And this is not what the CSU needs. It actually needs the complete opposite.
Oh, wasn't a question.
Oh, okay. Well,
I missed something. Were you finished your thought?
Yeah.
All right. Veronica?
Yeah, I would just like to clarify that the rest of the executives had no say in them going. It was just kind of, hey, we're going. This is how much we're going to spend. And nobody replied. So, I mean, no reply isn't really a yes.
Okay, thank you. Rory?
Okay, I have a few things that I've been thinking here. So to quickly summarize, the reasons why you went, or the benefits that came from this event in this report, are the building, strat plans, a non-hierarchical structure, decreasing number of execs, e-voting, being less politically focused, fee levies, and the health and dental plan. It seems to me from what everyone else has said that all of these reasons that you declare in this report as why you went or what you benefited, how you were benefited by attending this event, are all either inapplicable or not relevant or not with enough detail to justify that type of travel. Things like the building, yeah, it's great to meet another student group that has built a student space. This is a $107 million student space compared to our, $2-3 million potentially. Even the daycare, we just approved it. It was just over 1 million? And that was a big thing for us. UBC is also huge compared to us, just by the way. And then you also mentioned quite astutely that UBC helped fund the creation of this building. So it's it sounds like it's a little bit off context from what we would really be benefiting from if we were to go to SMU or other universities in Quebec, perhaps under the Accreditation Act, where the university has a legal obligation to provide us with space, compared to UBC that probably doesn't have a Accreditation Act legal requirement to provide us with space. It just seems like all the reasons why you went aren't valid. All the things you benefited from aren't relevant, aren't valid. And I just really wonder why you actually went to this. Was it really for the purpose of this conference? Or was it because someone offered you this trip, offered you this conference, and said, hey, you should go, I'll pay for it?
Okay, thank you. Asma? Okay, Omar?
Yeah, so just to answer your question, if the reasons for us going.
Okay guys, I'm not going to say it again. You need to
sorry.
address the chair, please.
So just to answer the question as to the reasons of going, were the ones that we've mentioned before, and we appreciate and acknowledge the fact that the councillors don't see the value in that. However, we did, and the document is general in nature. It's because we don't want to impose anything, or this is just our finding. And we also didn't put that many recommendations in the document because we wanted to leave it open for interpretation. And so the fact that it's like, how can we transpose some information? There are some good things, but it's for all of us to decide. It's not that, look, this is what everyone else is doing, this is what we should do. It's just to compare and contrast what's being done in the rest of Canada. Although the Quebec Student Union movement is different, there are still a lot of things that are in common that we do need to share with other student unions. And even from Quebec, again, we weren't the only student union that went. There was the University of Montreal, who were also provided with the trip, with the same offer that was extended to the CSU, and so was to SMU. Other unions actually sent more. The reasons why it was the two of us, it's because we also wanted to discuss the health and dental plan, and other unions actually sent a lot more executives, but that would have increased the cost even further.
Okay, thank you. Michaela?
Yeah, so basically, as council's job is to make sure that executives are holding up to what they're supposed to be doing. I just have to say that I'm a little bit dissatisfied with these certain executives who have made this document, because ultimately it's your job to understand the structures of how our union works. And we've created a non-hierarchical structure. We've created coordinator jobs. I would have hoped that your training would have helped you understand these structures. I understand that it's been said that it's just information in this document, but it's biased information. I don't know if that's the exact word that should be used, but basically by saying, I'm reiterating a little bit, but I think it's very important, that you can't just say something is confusing, because that is really putting you in a poor light by saying that you don't understand how this system works. And I highly advise that you look into this, because that is your job, and you're paid to do it.
Great, thank you. Eamon?
Yeah, so one of the big, it's against a whole bunch of the positions that we actually have as the CSU. It's anti-democratic and it's anti-student, and academia is labor, and we're a union, and it's time we start fucking acting like one.
Decorum, please. All right, Julia?
Yeah, I have a question for Omar or Sule. Okay, so when you went to the workshop on health and dental plan, okay, did you discuss maybe how to have concrete ways to promote this plan, to inform students about it? If so, like, what came out of that? Because I'm just a little bit confused about what was discussed, since our health and dental plan has been like fixed for like the next little while. I'm not sure how many years it is, but it's fixed for now. So I want to know like what was discussed, because a concern that I've received from students that I was planning on bringing up at the next council meeting was people know it exists, but they don't know like how to find it, but like you go on the website and it's very unclear, like you don't know how to submit exactly, what you could submit, like it's unclear. And if you have information about that wasn't mentioned in the report, then I would feel like at least this trip was worth like something, you know?
Do we have a direct from either yet?
Yeah, so we did go through a rigorous RFP process, which was aware, like I think there were counselors here that were present during the process. And one of the things in the memorandum of agreement with ASEC is that we will eventually transition to providing that service in-house. So having frontline service present at Concordia. And obviously that does have large costs to it, and we do need space to have that office. And that is an issue that would actually address students' concerns about where they have to go, what they have to do. The people that they would meet if the frontline service was at Concordia would be people that work for ASEC that can provide real-time update on their status. So the value that we got from going to UBC was actually seeing the offices in place and seeing if they actually work, speaking with the workers that are there on the front line to see what kind of questions they're getting, what kind of concerns students are expressing to them, and also if there's actually a need, do enough students show up, is there a demand for it? So it's a different experience to read about it, it's a different experience to talk to people about it, but it's a completely, it's a completely different experience when you actually see it and you hear from the people that are implicated in it directly.
Can I follow up? Yep. Yeah, I have just a comment and a follow-up. Like, I'm glad at least it was worth something, but I think this sort of thing needs to be discussed first. My second, follow-up question is, I would just like to understand how much time you had to decide on this and how long you gave the rest of your executives to decide on this, just to and did you tell them that you were going for the health and dental plan? So I have 3 questions basically that I would like someone to answer.
Can I get, Omar?
So as was previously mentioned by another executive, that we did post this on our group chat where everyone was able to have the chance to see it. Included how long we'll be there, what we'll be doing, specifically to the SUDS conference, but also to the health and dental plan. And there were some execs that brought up their concerns, and there were others that didn't.
My question was more like, okay, this guy tells you you're going on a trip. When did he tell you you're going on a trip? And when did you tell your executives, hey, I'm going on this trip?
Can I share an answer before we move on?
Yeah, so it was early July, and the same day that we had received the offer, we made it available, we made that information available to all the executives.
All right, thank you. Rowan?
Yep, I'll be presenting a motion. Alright. Whereas the following motion was passed by Council February 8, 2017, be it resolved that all CSU executives be mandated to describe in their monthly reports any and all gifts received courtesy of their position at the Concordia Student Union.
I'm going to close the door because I can't hear Rowan. Oh, thanks, Kevin.
Be it further resolved that should the CSU or its executives be offered any benefit or gift, brackets, trips, donations, grants, etc., end brackets, that is offered with the required consent of the executives, the council will have final approval as to whether or not it can be accepted or not while taking into consideration the positions book. Be it further resolved that policy committee be mandated to draft clauses for the standing regulations to this effect. Whereas Omar Riaz was a councillor at this time and can thus reasonably be expected to note said motion. Whereas Omar Riaz and Suleiman Alawi accepted flights to British Columbia as gifts in their role as CSU General Coordinator and Finance Coordinator respectively, yet neither asked council for approval nor reported these gifts to council. Whereas further costs of over $980 were incurred with the expectation of reimbursement by the CSU. Whereas the document, titled SUDS, sent to council regarding the conference bears a lack of information, and much of the information provided is not relevant to the unique reality of student unions in Quebec. Whereas the flights were given as gifts by Lev Buckman, CEO of Student Care / ASEC, whom the CSU has its health and dental insurance contract with, a contract worth between approximately $9 million to $15 million. Whereas Student Care / ASEC was one of the 6 main sponsors of the conference. Whereas in December 2016, Lev Buckman was found by the courts of Quebec to have previously given $123,000 in gifts to student associations. Whereas this offense could be considered worthy of impeachment, be it resolved that council present Omar Riaz and Suleiman El-Alawi with formal warnings.
Do we have a second? Ali? Roland, the floor is yours.
Sure. So to kind of just go over the motion, make sure everything's clear. So the motion that was passed back in February was passed in direct relation to the RFP process. So when different health insurance providers started making bids for our contract, they started sending gifts to the executives, and the executives wanted to make sure that in this kind of a context, there was clear discussion between the executives and council and that everything was reported and anything large would have been asked for permissions. And it specifically says trips in the motion. Technically speaking, both the finance and general coordinator are legally responsible to know about this motion. To be fair, if it was passed back in 2014 or 2005 or something, they could make a very fair claim that they just didn't know about it, but it wasn't. It was passed in February and Omar Riaz was a councillor. Yeah, and furthermore, they had many options to alert council. They had special council meetings that were called after that time. They said early July, so there was a month in between the conference, a month and a few days, which means that they had plenty of time to call a special council meeting. It takes 3 days notice. They also, the reason that this document was late, which I meant to apologize for, was because I was waiting for their reports to see if they would actually declare these gifts. They did not. If this had not been pre-known, then it simply would have passed by. This never would have reached council. They never would have actually disclosed this to council or to the students. Furthermore, another thing that as in my role as signing authority, I was dropped a check, 2 different checks totaling $980 for expenses on this trip, including $800 of car rental expenses for like 6 or 7 days, which is ridiculous. The budget line that this was taken from was health and dental plan premiums, which is where we pay for the health and dental plan. This is not an expense line to just incur expenses for your trips. These gifts, if they had been done last year, would easily be considered bribery. They were not. So I don't think this was a thing of a case of bribery, but this is still absolutely unacceptable. This is still a huge deal. They still attempted to hide this from council, and I think that is absolutely worth a warning, because this is coming near a very fine line, and if something like this happens again, they have crossed said line, in my opinion, and that is why the last whereas clause purposely mentions the word impeachment, because I think if this type of behavior continues, then that is the appropriate response.
All right, thank you. Just a reminder, we're not talking about daycares anymore, so tread very carefully and speak through me. Omar.
So to address the motion, I would like to start off by accepting responsibility for this oversight. I would like to also emphasize and reassure council that there should be no perception of conflict of interest in this case. The CSU went through a rigorous process of an RFP for the health and dental plan, in which I was not involved beyond my capacity as a councillor, where I voted in good conscience. At the time, I was not in contact with any member of ASEC, nor was I ever approached. Furthermore, at the time of the conference, the CSU or any of its members were not in any sort of contract negotiations. We attended the conference for several reasons, as we believe, and as shown in our report, that it adds value to the CSU and will allow us to improve the services we provide to our membership. In addition, consistent with our objective to bring in-house and frontline services currently provided by ASEC and self-insured insurance policy already being used by UBC. In fact, this change would decrease the amount of funds transferred to ASEC as per the Memorandum of Agreement signed on 12 April 2017. In July 2017, ASEC offered to provide airline tickets as a sponsor to the SUDS conference. Other student unions in Montreal, including University of Montreal and McGill, received and accepted the same offer. We remained forthcoming about attending the conference, and all executives were aware. The trip was not considered a personal gratuity. To rectify the situation and to ensure that it does not repeat itself, we will be working with Policy Committee to include the following policy in the standing regulations, which we will aim to present at the next council meeting.
Thank you. Ali?
I just wanted to bring to attention something that was written in the General Coordinator Exec report. And it says that Exec has also recently brought to our attention that a new generation of drugs may increase the amount claimed by students and therefore may increase premiums. And the reason I'm bringing this up is I feel like it's tied to this trip for some reason, and I don't know what might happen or anything. I am not 100% sure, but that this comes with this at the same time, I feel like there's maybe some conflict.
Great, thank you. Sule?
It was specifically to address the budget line thing. So the contract that was signed on April 12th, 2017 between the CSU and ASEC implies that there will be certain costs into implementing the services in-house. Specifically, line 38, the CSU has the option to take over responsibility of any of the services provided by student care under paragraphs 3, data management, web administration, and full member support, and 4, communications and promotion as per Appendix D, which I will read over in a bit. Student care will work, train, and cooperate with the CSU to enable a smooth, seamless, and efficient transfer of responsibilities. Credit of the third-party administration fees will be given to the CSU as per Appendix D. So Appendix D is a breakdown of what the fee for the health and fee for the dental that we pay to ASEC is, and about two $225 for health and $225 for dental, for data management administration full membership support, and $125 for health, $125 for dental for communication and promotion, which the CSU would no longer be paying ASEC if we were to bring it in-house. Now, clause 38, student care will work, train, and cooperate with the CSU to enable a smooth, successful, efficient transfer. That implies costs, especially for training and cooperation, right? In order for us to be able to have proper training from student care, we would likely have to pay them something. So it was a bit of an oversight on last year's team to not have included a budget line for that specifically. And so what we've done is put it in a holder account for now, which is the CSU Health and Dental Plan premiums, until that budget line is created, health and dental plan expenses. So that would be something that was approved from the signing of the contract last year, so it would have been approved at council. So I'm not really sure what the process is now for that specific budget line, but we'll discuss it later.
Great, thank you. I have Asma next on the speakers list.
I just wanted to be excused. I haven't been well this morning, and I've had someone agree to pick me up, and I was hoping that there would be a break where I could announce this with less contention, but I guess it's just happening in the middle of this conversation.
Motion to excuse Asma.
Okay. All in favor? 12. All opposed? And abstentions? Okay, thank you. All right. Feel better? Next on the speakers list, I have Reem.
So I kind of have a lot of questions about what's going on. I see there's a big conflict that happened, in the past. It's just that a lot of comment from my side. I feel that there's a part of the room that is very well aware of the situation, and another part of the room that is not. And that is partly because the motion was sent.
Point of personal privilege, could you just repeat, because I couldn't
Okay,
hear
yes.
you.
So saying it is a big conflict, and I feel that some people are very well aware of what happened because they were there before, or because they just got the information, and whereas another part of the room doesn't have the full image. So part of that is because the motion was maybe sent late, or some documents were sent late. I would suggest that I wouldn't want to make a decision if I am not aware of what I'm voting on. So I want to be provided with more documents and with possibly more time to look into this.
Thank you.
Yep, so a few things. First off, I do want to echo one thing that the general coordinator stated, saying the RFP, about the RFP process itself last school year. I sat on that committee, completely unrelated, completely legit by my standpoint. For complete transparency, Lev Buckman brought 2 boxes of croissants to share with the committee because that's the insurance industry. But that's just a quick aside. To go into more points, there's a discussion to kind of respond to what Reem said, to try to give more background information so that counselors are in a better place to do this. So there's an insurance company that we have been with our health and dental plan for several decades now called Student Care. The CEO of which is Lev Buckman. We recently re-signed a contract in April. The contract is worth between $9 and $12 million. Last year, the CSU executive were offered this exact trip to the same conference by Lev Buckman / Student Care and refused, and put the motion in place that I read out in the motion I presented as a reaction to that. This is something that happens fairly often, something that's fairly common for the insurance industry, and this was kind of an extension of that. And so when this trip was offered again to the current executive, there's nothing to say that they couldn't have gone, but the proper process when accepting gifts of over $1,000 due to the motion and just due to common sense and good practice, is to ask the board of directors, aka council. That was not done. Furthermore, it was purposefully hid, or maybe not hid, but purposely omitted from all their documents. And I think that is a very serious issue, and I think that's kind of what we're talking on. I don't know how much I've actually provided, but I hope to have done some. To move on, the costs of going in-house, although I agree there will be costs, there will be training costs, etc. I really don't see why flights to British Columbia are part of that. And my final question is for the general coordinator or the finance coordinator. What was the reason for not mentioning in the exec reports that these flights were given as a gift?
Is there a direct response? Omar?
There was a complete oversight on our part. It wasn't hidden on purpose. There was no malintent behind it. And so that's really what there is to it. And that's for that reason I do take responsibility for not having mentioned it to council. But it's not that I'm trying to actively hide it and say that it's not true.
Great, thank you. Julia is not here, so I'll put her bottom. Omar?
Well, I'm good, thanks.
Okay, Michaela, Rory, and then Reed.
Yeah, so all I want to say at this point is that it is very evident that many counselors and very sadly executive who were apparently informed but didn't actually consent, because saying nothing isn't consenting. These people did not agree with this trip or these recommendations that you're putting in the document. And I just really hope that this isn't repeated during the year, and that you are more transparent. And I appreciate that you're realizing that this is a really big oversight.
Thank you. Rory?
Okay, I have a few points, if I might be able to make them sequentially here. Something that maybe hasn't been mentioned yet is that, but it was implied, is that this is also a deficiency as leaders. You two are both leaders, or maybe, sorry?
Me?
Yes. Omar and Sule are members and leaders, student leaders within their team, within their executive team. I'm not saying they're the leader of the team, but they are leaders within their team. This is early in the year, this is early in their mandates, and this has resulted in a situation where teammates have been placed in positions where they haven't really been given the option of saying no, or they were given the option of objecting to it, but they weren't asked if they consented to it. That's not active consent, that's, do you object to something? It's not the same thing. And there was dissent voiced that wasn't appropriately addressed. This has created a situation where now you're at the beginning of your mandates and you have a team that may not trust your decisions, may not trust how you make your decisions, may not trust what, whether you're taking their opinions into account. This is discourse within your team. And to see this, like as a counselor, to see this so early on in the year within the executive, because of these decisions you've made, is really worrying to me. And I would just I would hope that it doesn't become a bigger problem, or that it doesn't poison that dynamic. But it's just that we should also be cognizant of this type of issue isn't just something that affects the CSU. It isn't just something that it actually affects these people working on a day-to-day basis in their executive positions. That was my one point, separate. I want to address some of the things that Omar had said about, very specifically, you said that this is not a conflict of interest because there's no RFP process currently in place or currently being active. I disagree very strongly with that. And I disagree not because it's my personal opinion, but because it's fact. And when I heard about this and I did the research on it, I actually found that it is fact that it would be a conflict of interest. So Section 120 of the Canadian Business Corporations Act expresses the disclosure of interest. These documents have been provided through Caitlin. I'll draw your attention to where it says that the disclosure required by the subsection must be made in the case of an officer who's not a director, which would be executives, immediately after he or she becomes aware that the contract, transaction, or proposed contract or proposed transaction is to be considered, or if the officer becomes interested after a contract or transaction has been made. So we've already made a contract with ASEC, We already have a contract with them. We already have RFP's done, fine, great, we have a contract. It's after the contract's been made, and you two now have an interest in that matter because you've had an executive of this company pay for your travel somewhere. That is a conflict of interest. You have received a benefit from this. I also want to draw attention to the Quebec Business Corporations Act, where it covers disclosure, and it says interest is any financial stake in a contract or transaction that may reasonably be considered likely to influence decision making. I don't care if it's croissants, I don't care if it's flights, I don't care if it's a puppy. If it could reasonably be assumed to influence your decision making now, previously, in the future, it's a conflict of interest. And a proposed contract, including related negotiations or solicitations, is considered a contract or transaction in this context of disclosure. So you guys also talk about in your, or Omar and Souley talk about in this report, and Omar talks about in his executive report, that you're looking at these changes with our student, dental, health and dental plan. You're looking at changing, bringing the customer service in-house, making these possible changes. You're cognizant of that. So if you know and you're trying to bring about some changes, that's going to require renegotiations. It's going to require work with this company. Whether it's a renegotiation, it's going to require a transactional relationship with ASEC. Period, the end. You know this. You knew this. You're aware of it. But yet, you still didn't disclose when that company came and gave you a gift. I think it's important to remind what Rowan had said is that the other expenses for this trip were allocated under that ASEC budget line. I find it sort of juxtaposed that the report on this conference covers the student building, the strat plans, the execs, e-voting, stuff like that. And the reason why they went was because it's a student conference, it's student leadership, etc. But yet the expenses related to this trip are allocated under a budget line for health and dental. If you went for a conference, budgeted under a conference, budgeted under professional development, and pay for it yourself, I have no problem with the CSU funding the executive team to go to workshops, conferences, professional development. That helps them do their job better, if it helps them do their job better. But this was allocated under health and dental. It seems to be like it was for other stuff. We don't know, and it was paid for by the health and dental person. So that just adds up to me as being extremely dishonest. Done for now.
Great, thank you. Reem?
Just to add on a point that Rory brought up. So actually one of my questions was like how the decision was made. How come people get to travel without the team's consent, without no one knowing? This is exactly why I want to actually have more information about what happened, when it happened, like how it happened, just details. And my opinion for now, is not to rush in making decision. It's actually to see all the facts and who's responsible, and if there are more people responsible, just to study the situation. And I'd like to postpone the motion till the next meeting, if possible.
Is that a motion?
Yes, I motion to postpone.
It would have had to be done at the beginning, before the motivation, so I'm not going to accept it currently. If you want, I can put you back on the speakers list, though. To do it after. Yeah, it's a procedural thing, but it's important. Julia?
First I'm going to call the question and then have a little comment.
Okay.
So I go to
wait, no, you can't do both of them, sorry.
Yeah, but
do I have a
next time on the
second to
speakers
call the
list.
question?
The call question being
On the current motion.
voting on
Yeah.
the motion.
Ali? Okay, so the question's been the call to question is on the table. So all those in favor of calling the question, please raise your placards.
Can I do that, please?
Yep. 10, all those opposed, and any abstentions. 1, 2, 3. Okay, so the question's been called. That means we're currently voting on Rowan's motion. I can put you back after.
No, can you reread, please? Just
Oh, yeah.
last part is the result, so people know what they're voting on.
So,
Yep. Did you have a question, Amit?
yeah, like what is exactly like
Yeah, he's about to read it.
Yes. Do you want the entire motion or just the be it resolved?
the result?
Okay. Be it resolved that council present Omar Riaz and Suleiman Al-Alawi with formal warnings.
Right. Is everyone okay with that? Yeah. Okay, so all those in favor, please raise your placards. 12, all those opposed? And any abstentions? 2. All right, thank you. So we're back on the original speakers list, which is no one. So I have Julia, Sule, Rory, and Rowan. Floor is yours.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I think as a council, we understand that this was most likely done with good intentions, and that's not what we're arguing. I think it's just important to know that like these decisions need to be made collectively, and that's why we're bringing it up. I also don't understand how the expense was put under health and dental. Like, I know it's been explained, but I don't think it should come out of there if it was already paid out. I know Rowan or Rory could probably say whether they signed the check or not, but I think not. Okay, so I think this should be, like, as an executive, they should decide, maybe with an external facilitator, up to them, where this is going to come from, and not like reimburse the expenses until like the next council meeting, because I think we should all be aware of like what budget line it was taken out of, and making sure that the executive had a chance to really meet and discuss this, because we want to make sure that the executive could continue working together in a healthy, collaborative way. So yeah, that would be my suggestion for the executive to meet on this, and then pick what budget line it comes out of for the extra costs, and then have it come back as a point, maybe, Caitlin, in the next council meeting. But again, like, we appreciate the good intentions. Just the reason why you work as an executive is to discuss these things, to see if there's anything that you missed. So maybe this wouldn't have come up had people talked about it and been like, oh, maybe it would be a better idea if we had, you know, a meeting with a different student association in Quebec, or if we Skyped into that meeting, or if we had a meeting with the CEO with the whole executive present, so that we could talk about how this decision could be made and that sort of thing. It's really important to be transparent as a body. The CSU represents transparency, and I think this is maybe just a miscommunication / misunderstanding of roles at the CSU, and perhaps it would be a good idea to have like a meeting with the CSU lawyer to talk about the roles and responsibilities that each executive has as a representative of this association that's been elected, and that students entrust with a salary to represent them adequately.
All right, thank you. Sule? Oh, yes?
Just a comment before I leave. It's just for the future, I would like that big information, especially about conflict like this, to be presented early, and because this is something I feel strongly about, I would want to have a say in these type of decisions, and just being presented with information late, it's sort of omitting you from having a vote or a say. So.
Thank you. Sule?
I want to start by saying that I completely agree with what Julia just said about us going back as an executive, and also meeting with our lawyer to go through that, but also to figure out where this expense will be coming from as an exec. I would also like to suggest that either policy committee or an ad hoc committee get together and like write down an actual process and put it in the standing regulations, so that a situation like this does not occur again. Right now, it's my understanding that the gift thing was not in the standing regs, and that there is no such procedure as well. So I just want to make sure that's explicit, so that we don't have any more conflict like this arising.
Thank you. Rory?
Okay, I want to make a couple points here. One, again, I want to make a couple points. Sorry, everyone. Just because the procedure isn't explicitly in our standing regs, just because you weren't there in February when this motion was carried, I want to make a very strongly emphasized point that what the CSU decided in February is in addition to what already exists in the Canadian Business Corporations Act, in the Quebec Business Corporations Act, in the Civil Code of Quebec, among others. So these acts that describe how corporations with directors and boards like us and executives and officers like them are supposed to act, what our duties are, what our obligations are, what our legal liabilities are, and they are oh so clear. So clear. Every single one of them repeats it and repeats it and repeats it. What conflict of interest is, when officers have to disclose it, when it has to be brought to boards, when it has to be made known, when they have to ask. Your job as an officer, your job as an executive of the CSU is to know what your obligations and duties are. I understand we're students, I understand we're learning, but even if someone would claim ignorance and say, I don't know, I had to disclose that, does it not just feel wrong when a company with which you have a multi-million-dollar contract comes and says, hey, I'll pay for your flights? I don't think we need a council resolution from February. I don't think we need all the laws, all the legislation, all the regulations to tell us that that's wrong. And at the very least, that you just put your hand up and say, I think this is wrong, what do we do? That's one of the points that I want to make about that. I find it a little bit, I'm going to be really blunt here. I find it insulting, actually. I find it insulting that it is proposed that this be pushed to Polycom to make new policies on, or that it's pushed to the executive team to talk about and to make sure it doesn't happen in future. This didn't happen because of a mistake that can be rectified by talking about it. You don't accept flights as like a whoopsies. It's not a whoopsies. And I think we need to treat this like it's not a whoopsies. I like that there's a formal warning, but I think that some more serious reprimand needs to be presented. There is a second motion that was sent out by Caitlin in this regard that goes through what the laws were that have been violated. Again, regardless of what CSU or regs say, the laws that were violated, what these people have done, and what can be done to fix it. What I'd like from council is I'd like some guidance here on what we feel is appropriate. So Caitlin has sent this out. If I'm given the opportunity to discuss my be it resolves, then I will come forward to make the motion that everyone seems to feel is fair.
As you wish.
Okay? Everyone's okay? No one wants to jump me back on the speakers list?
It was an issue, to make the motion or to discuss? Oh, you know, to make the motion, no, sorry.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Rowan?
Yeah, so a few things. I want to reemphasize some of what Rory said. I mean, there was so many chances to do this. If like this was a slip up, like it was one that was made continuously over and over. There was no council meeting call to approve it. There was no mention of it in the reports, and there was no mention of it in the document prepared, etc., etc., etc. Furthermore, I do have one further question. Looking at the website and using the dates that were provided by the Finance and General Coordinator, the registration fees, because there are registration fees, would total about $1,090. And I would like the General Coordinator or the Finance Coordinator to answer who paid for these fees. Was it yourselves expecting to be reimbursed by the CSU? Was it Lev Buckman? Was it Student Care? And if it was expected to be reimbursed, why is it that I have not seen a check yet?
Was that indirect, or sorry, please direct?
Okay. They were put on the CSU credit card. We incurred those costs because we thought there was value to going to this to this conference and to
Okay, Julia? Oh, sorry, did you have a follow-up?
Yeah, so you're saying that this has already been spent by the CSU and that you spent this money and like it's gone and paid already.
Do you have a direct response? Okay. Julia?
Yeah, so I would like to move for the CSU executive to have a meeting with their lawyer so as to discuss what their roles and responsibilities are and how they could fulfill them adequately to make sure that they're representing the students the way that they should. And then I would also like for the CSU executive to come with a decision as to where they're gonna pick, you know, what gets reimbursed from, like what budget line this gets reimbursed from, and bring it up at the next council, just so that it's formalized.
Okay, do we have a second? Okay, so there's a motion with no second. Okay, so.
Can you reiterate it? Sorry.
Yeah,
I'm tired. No worries. I just wanted to formalize what I had said earlier, that the CSU should probably have a meeting with its lawyer, and I want to mandate them to do that before the next council meeting to talk about what their roles and responsibilities are. Like, it's still early in the year, so they have time to like figure it out. And I think if they have a meeting with their lawyer and that we mandate them to do that, they could write up like a one-pager of like, oh, this is what our lawyer suggested that we could do for the future to make sure that we fulfill our role as executives properly. That includes like non-hierarchical stuff, what that means, the bylaws. And then as a second point, I want to formalize what I also said earlier, that this money was spent. It was spent with the CSU credit card. So this whole CSU executive should sit down together and figure out what budget line this is coming out of, because I don't think it should come out of health and dental. And they obviously need to talk about this. And I think we can trust them as a body to make a decision and bring it back at the next council meeting for approval.
I second it.
Okay, since you already motivated, I'll open speakers list. Rowan?
I don't think this has anything to do with like roles as executives. I mean, it wasn't that they were, like, it wasn't that the finance coordinator completely left his finance office and just like went and did sustainability issues. I think this was very much an issue of accepting gifts, and I don't know what the meeting with the lawyer would really bring out from this. Like, I don't really see a purpose. I think if they want to do it, it's fine. If they see a personal benefit, I don't see the point. I don't see this as something that's necessary to force them to do. As for the decision on budget line, I really don't like this, just because I don't think that this should be something that the executive decides. I think that this is something that council should look at, something that council should have discussions about, and what is done with this money should not simply be decided by the people who spend it.
Great, thank you. I have Veronica, Sule, and then Julia. Veronica?
Yeah, I don't really like the idea of sitting down as an executive to decide where this money should be taken from, just because like literally 6 of the executives weren't part of it, so I don't understand why we have to kind of do this, make this decision. And I think council is much more appropriate to make the decision right now today. So.
Thank you. Sule?
I rescind.
Okay, Julia?
Okay, I would like to remove the thing about picking where it comes from. Thanks, Veronica.
Do you want to amend to remove the last part?
Yeah.
Okay, can I just get a second? Can we consider it friendly? Thank you.
Can I like use my motivation?
Yeah.
I think it's important to still talk to a lawyer. Like, I know, Rowan, what you said, but that's not what I mean. Like, I mean, it's just important to have a meeting with your lawyer to talk about the roles and responsibilities. I don't think it's been like done appropriately. I know the firm the CSU uses, and like they are usually very, very good at making sure that everyone understands their roles. Not like, oh, I'm finance coordinator, I do things with money, but like I represent this association as an elected individual, and this is what it entails. And I think that it's an informative thing that could really help them in the future, make sure they understand like that they're accountable to council in these ways. So it'll be very like concrete, and I think it's just a good way for them to like understand and learn from their mistakes, but also as a whole like understand that, yeah, this is more than just about us. So I think it's an important like learning process that should be taken by them, by everyone.
Thank you. Veronica?
Yeah, so on the meeting with the lawyer, I don't really think, I just find it a little insulting for myself to meet with the lawyers to discuss my roles and responsibilities, since we've had literally an entire month,
the month of May to do the trainings to learn our roles from the previous executives. And I feel like I understand my role really, really well. So I would just like to be excluded from this session.
Layla?
I feel similarly to Veronica. I also think that the nature of the CSU versus what a lawyer is able to offer as far as insight is slightly different, and our lawyer is familiar with our obligations legally, but that doesn't extend to all of our obligations or previous positions that have been taken, which I think is more relevant to the situation we're speaking about now. I don't think that the idea